Our story begins at the grand and prestigious Valdar Academy. During the graduation ceremony, the Academy's representative, Michael Foxon, is called to the stage. He confidently steps up to the podium, greeting everyone with a calm smile. This is Michael Foxon, the model student, representing the Academy's second graduating class. But watching from a nearby tree, someone knows a different side of him. He scoffs, finding it hard to believe the bumbling kid he once knew is now a polished speaker, even if he does look like a talking cotton swab. As Michael calls his 3 years here the most meaningful of his life, his former teacher privately admits he never taught him anything useful. The teacher grins, reflecting on the countless events that have transpired over the years. But for him, it's a moment of pure triumph. The main quest is over, and it's time to enjoy a quiet life, leaving the novel's plot behind. His celebration freezes as Michael credits his success to one man, leaving him stunned. Why is Professor Chris's name being mentioned? Michael's voice rings out, declaring that Professor Chris is the reason for his success. Chris can only stare in utter confusion, wondering what this kid is talking about. Michael knows his teacher has reasons for leaving the academy, so he asks for a chance to repay him. With a chillingly confident smile, he pledges to follow Chris for the rest of his life. Chris nearly falls out of his tree, screaming internally that Michael is the protagonist whose story is just beginning. But the horror doesn't stop there, as Michael reveals it's not just him, his classmates, the other main characters of the novel, all step forward in unison. Together, they turn and bow, pledging their undying loyalty to one man, Professor Chris. Stunned into silence, Chris can only point, his mind completely blanking at this impossible situation. His quiet retirement shatters as he screams in despair, realizing he's somehow broken the entire plot. And how did he get here? It all started before the academy, right after a fatal car accident. As his consciousness began to fade on the cold asphalt, something strange appeared. A system window, a main quest from the Earth God, promising a new life. He thought it was just a hallucination, the last flicker of a dying brain, until a single word burned through the haze, reflected in his eye. Live. A desperate, primal urge surged through him. He refused to die here. With his life just beginning, he reached out, clawing for that one chance. He accepted the quest without hesitation, and in an instant he woke up. A strange woman was looking over him, cheerfully calling him Mr. Chris. His mind raced. She couldn't see the system window, but more importantly, who was Chris? She confirms his new identity, Chris Doughton, and hands him his official ID. The card bears a grim-looking photo, identifying him as a new teacher at Valdar Academy. His mind reels not only at the name of the academy, but at the fact he can read this strange language. She explains that the academy will understand his absence, given the train accident. That phrase hits a nerve, and a wave of panic washes over him as he desperately asks for a mirror. But before he can see his reflection, the system window flares to life, giving him a formal welcome. He's been reincarnated as Chris Doughton and must now complete quests for the next 3 years. And that's when it all clicks. Valdar Academy, that was the setting of a fantasy novel he used to read. A trashy, power fantasy story about a weakling who awakens as a demon king and gets a harem. He tries to recall the plot, but one terrifying question remains. Who in the hell is Chris Doughton? His head throbs, struggling to process the information overload. Suddenly, a new system window appears with his very first quest: get to the academy gates. The reward is a map, but the penalty for failure is a grim, one-word sentence: death. He completely loses it, screaming at the invisible screen that he just died once already. After forcing his early discharge, he finds himself walking the streets of this new world, sore and exhausted. Not only is he a new teacher with no money, but the clinic just took half his savings. A painful chibi flashback reminds him of the smiling nurse taking all his gold. With the academy a half-day's walk away, Hez still no closer to figuring out who Chris Doughton really is. But there's one thing he's always wanted to try in a world like this, a classic move. He summons his status window, only to stare in disbelief at his pathetically weak F-rank stats. And just when it couldn't get worse, a system message pops up, delivering the final blow. Illegal players cannot use skills. Hez not just weak, Hez completely locked out of the magic system. His mind reels. Did he somehow reincarnate through a pirated version of the game? Suddenly, a horrifying piece of world lore clicks into place. In this world, the only beings who can't use magic are monsters, and Hez about to teach at the top magic academy. He can already see his future, tied to a stake, trying to explain he's not a demon. But the system's countdown timer snaps him out of his panic. He has to move. He can't just run. This is his second chance at life, and he refuses to waste it. Clenching his fist, he remembers one small detail from his status. His fame is listed as shut-in mage. A sly grin forms. He was once reported for role-playing too realistically online. Fine. He'll just have to become the mysterious, powerful mage who never shows his true strength. His plan is set. For the next 3 years, he will survive by pretending he's the real deal. And with that newfound resolve, he arrives at the grand gates of Valdar Academy. The place is eerily quiet, the entrance ceremony having ended a week ago, leaving even the statues bored. But suddenly, one of the stone gargoyles snaps to attention. It senses a figure approaching, cloaked in an oppressively dark aura. The immense magical pressure must belong to the new teacher it had heard about. But no, as the figure draws closer, the gargoyle realizes this power is on another level entirely. It observes the man's features, the pale skin, the wild black hair, the sunken midnight eyes. The gargoyle's stone form begins to crack. This isn't a mage. This is death itself walking in human form. Those red eyes hold a heavy void, a story of countless ends that chills it to its very core. He takes a steady step forward, his presence silencing the very air. The gargoyle, blind to the abyss before it, scoffs at this pebble disgracing the academy gates. It roars with misplaced authority, demanding he state his name and purpose. But the man just smirks, completely unfazed by the petty display. With a chilling smile, he introduces himself as the new teacher, Chris Doughton, and commands the gate to be opened. He walks right past the now frozen guardian, his bluff having landed perfectly. Strolling down the academy path, he keeps his composure, each step a carefully measured performance. But the moment he's clear, the mask begins to crack. He stumbles, clutching his chest in sheer exhaustion, admitting to himself that was way too close. He thought he was a goner. Still, after catching his breath, a sly grin returns. He has to admit, that whole intimidating act was actually pretty cool. His plan is simple. Play the part of the totally unmotivated ultimate teacher. A deadbeat on the outside, but secretly a battle-hardened warrior meant to guide the protagonist. This whole mess started after losing someone dear, a mistake that sent him spiraling until the headmaster intervened. The core of his trauma is that he refuses to take on another disciple, believing these weaklings aren't worth his time anyway. He cackles to himself, already imagining his cool, detached persona. Yeah, this is going to be perfect. But as he revels in his genius plan, he glances down at his hand and freezes. Is that blood? His old wound must have reopened. A sudden wave of dizziness and pain washes over him. Just then, a quest completion pops up, rewarding him with a map. A map. He needs healing, not directions. Stumbling through the courtyard, he knows he can't just run to the infirmary in this state. Suddenly, a gentle voice asks if he's all right, and he looks up to see the academy's top student, Michael Foxon. Michael points out the obvious, noting that the new instructor is bleeding from his head. But Chris barely hears him, his eyes locked on the cursed crest snaking across the boy's cheek. He knows this kid. This is the protagonist. He hasn't awakened yet, though. His hair is still brown, and he's just an awkward, nervous student, a far cry from the hero he's destined to become. Still, Chris can't let his guard down. He has a role to play, and that role is the totally unmotivated ultimate teacher. So he glares, demanding to know why a student is loitering around here instead of being in class. The question catches Michael completely off guard, and he stammers, unsure how to respond to the intense, bleeding man. He finally explains that he couldn't keep up, so the other teacher told him not to bother coming to the training grounds anymore. Chris almost scoffs. Of course he can't keep up. Right now, Michael can barely manage a basic fireball. The power gap is just pathetic. But even so, a flicker of annoyance crosses his mind. What a jerk, treating a student like that. His thoughts, however, come out a bit too harsh, and Michael immediately starts crying, thinking the insult was for him, leaving Chris utterly baffled. Chris sighs. This whole situation is a pain. He just needs to get this crying kid back to his classroom. But then a quest window flashes into view. He's the new homeroom teacher for Class X, and the penalty for being late is death. A map is useless when he's completely lost, but then it clicks. This sniveling kid has to be one of his students. Michael stammers out that he's in Class X, begging for his life, only for Chris to cut him off with a simple command. Lead the way. Seeing the boy's hesitation, Chris leans in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, asking if he stuttered. That's all it takes. Michael snaps to attention, tears flying as he shouts his compliance. The terrified student quickly guides him through the halls until they arrive at a door marked with a golden X. And somehow, Michael ended up carrying the injured professor the entire way, much to Chris's internal annoyance at the boy's weakness. The second they're inside, Michael collapses onto the floor, completely spent from the effort. His dramatic entrance immediately earns him the mockery of his classmates, who tell him to stop seeking attention. Michael just hangs his head, too exhausted and ashamed to even respond. But before the jeers can continue, the sound of a heavy footstep cuts through the noise. The students all turn, their mockery dying on their lips as they see who has just entered. A dark, oppressive aura washes over the classroom as the mysterious man walks past them. He strides directly to the front and plants his hands on the podium, claiming the room without a word. Surveying the faces before him, one thought echoes in his mind. Every last one of them is trash. He can't believe this is the class he's supposed to teach. Has Valdar really fallen this far? The students start whispering, wondering who this bleeding man is and why he's addressing the headmaster's name. But one student has had enough of the mystery and raises his hand with a sharp, indignant motion. It's Nika Tot, the class honor student, demanding to know who this unauthorized person is. Nika confidently introduces himself as Chris Doughton, then it dawns on him, oh, he's the one who was late because of that accident. But the man's patience has already run out, and he cuts the student off with a single, cold command to shut it. The honor student recoils as Chris internally panics, realizing his timing was off, and his grand entrance is now just embarrassing. Okay, the strong first impression was made, but now he has to actually teach to clear his quest, and he knows absolutely nothing. With no other options, a desperate plan forms in his mind as he picks up a piece of chalk. He turns his back on the silent, confused students, ready to deliver his very first lesson. And on the board, he scrawls two simple words: self-study. He'll just have to wing it with the right attitude. The students, including a baffled Michael Foxon, can only stare. Is this for real? Chris kicks his feet up on the desk, knowing how pathetic this looks, but deciding he has to commit to being bold. He then leans over as if to sleep, leaving the entire class wondering if their new professor just assigned self-study and passed out on day one. Even as he fakes sleep, Chris has to agree with the unspoken sentiment. Is this even a real lesson? Suddenly, a sharp voice cuts through the silence, demanding he stop this tasteless joke. A student named Angelina is on her feet, absolutely furious at this insult to Valdar Academy. Ah, Chris recognizes her now. Angelina Sheriff, one of the novel's heroines, the so-called Ice Princess. On the surface, she's a duke's proud daughter, and she absolutely refuses to accept this farce. He gets it. For these nobles, his attitude must be completely unbearable. This will definitely cause problems down the line, but in his current state, this is all he can do. He knows her tragic backstory from the novel, and a part of him feels for her, but he can't show it. Without even looking at her, he delivers a cold ultimatum. If she's unhappy, she can leave. He then sits up, locking eyes with her and repeating his command, inwardly apologizing for the necessary cruelty. Angelina can't believe what she just heard, absolutely stunned by his audacity. But Chris gazes like ice, telling her he won't repeat himself. If she dislikes his class, she can get out. The proud daughter of a duke is trembling with pure, unadulterated rage. Michael tries to calm her down, but it's too late. She's already decided she has no interest in learning from someone like him. She spits that she has no time to waste on a worthless teacher, and turns on her heel to leave. With a dramatic flair, she storms out of the classroom, her followers right behind her. Michael watches them go, completely powerless to stop the mass exodus. Chris, however, is perfectly calm. He knew this would happen. They're nobles, after all. He just wonders how many will remain. He's braced to be fired, but trusts the headmaster has his back. And just then, a quest completion screen appears. He survived. He glances over his shoulder. The first trial of his new teaching career officially passed. And as he surveys the room, Chris can't help but feel a little smug. It seems only the main characters decided to stay. The protagonist Michael, the honor student Nika, the fiery Dolce, and the quiet healer Belle, the whole gang's here. Now that the distractions are gone, he can finally begin. Time to say something a real mentor would. His voice drops, a sudden coldness gripping the room as he warns them that learning magic half-heartedly gets people killed. Because this place, Valdar Academy, isn't some prestigious school for the elite. His eyes glow with a chilling intensity. It's a training ground for killers. The students are stunned into silence, the harsh words hanging in the air. He paints a grim picture of what happens when you give a deadly weapon to someone who can't even control their own power. Calling the inevitable slaughter an accident or a mistake is nothing more than sugarcoating reality. He leans in, his gaze piercing, and asks if they truly have the resolve to bear such a heavy responsibility. The students are left speechless, unable to process the professor's brutal honesty. With a faint, chilling smile, Professor Chris considers his work done. He turns and sweeps out of the room, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Michael Foxon can only lower his head, the weight of that responsibility crushing him. But the second he's outside, the intimidating professor collapses against a wall, letting out a heavy sigh. He feels like he just lost 10 years of his life. Playing this character is exhausting. Then he remembers the reward he got, this ridiculous little monkey keychain. And what the hell, it's actually adorable, a fact he internally gushes over. But as much as he loves it, he knows it would completely ruin his dark and broody vibe. A system window pops up, forcing a choice. Equip the item to see its effect, but be stuck with it. Curiosity wins out, and he decides to check the stats on the ridiculous monkey keychain. The system confirms his hopes. It's a cheat item that boosts his agility by an entire rank. He smirks, thinking he can just hide it under his clothes and enjoy the massive combat advantage. But then a second notification appears, detailing the item's absolutely humiliating side effect. His face twists in horror. From now on, every sentence he says will end with key. He begins ranting at the system window, just as a familiar student rounds the corner. It's Angelina Sheriff, the Ice Princess, who now sees her terrifying professor having a meltdown. She immediately regrets not using a stealth spell for her secret smoke break. Trapped by his piercing gaze, she knows she's completely and utterly busted. But he's sizing her up as well, recognizing the unmistakable air of an arrogant genius. She steels herself for the scornful gaze she's endured her entire life. But he just stands there, silent, making her wonder why he isn't restraining her. Feeling the immense pressure, Angelina finally cracks and confesses to smoking. Dropping the cigarette, she admits it was wrong and prepares to accept any punishment. A part of her thinks this is for the best, even if it tarnishes her reputation. She secretly hopes he'll deem her unfit, finally freeing her from her burdens. Instead of scolding her, he just pokes her forehead, calling her a pathetic kidkey. The Ice Princess is completely stunned, unable to process his gentle reaction. He saw right through her, recognizing her reckless act as a foolish attempt to numb pain. It reminds him of his own tragic past, a regret that haunts him to this day. A blush creeps across her face as she realizes he's not some tyrannical monster after all. He's just human, and she watches him turn to leave, the air between them completely changed. But as he moves, something small and brown tumbles from inside his cloak. A little monkey doll, a memento, she realizes, from someone important in his painful past. Mortified, she bows deeply, apologizing for her reckless behavior and for making him remember. He just walks on. A little surprised, she didn't seem to notice his strange speech pattern slip out. Later, back at the door to the now infamous X class, Angelina is flustered, trying to explain away her sudden interest in the professor's healing magic. Meanwhile, the original novel's protagonist is practically buzzing with excitement about their new 5-person elite unit. And Dolce smirks, glad all the useless extras transferred out, leaving only the best of the best. Dolce wastes no time cozying up to Michael, earning a silent judgment from the professor, a true devil-type heroine, indeed. But Belle, ever the serious one, cuts her off, telling her to face forward and asking what today's lesson will be. Professor Chris sighs, knowing it's finally time for a real lesson, one he desperately wished he could avoid. With a heavy tone, he announces that today's class will be field training, and just as he says it, a system quest pops up: hunt 50 monsters in 2 hours. In an instant, the scenery shifts from the classroom to a bright, sunlit meadow. A massive teleportation circle flares to life beneath their feet, and the entire X-class is bathed in a blinding pillar of light. Leo is absolutely buzzing, exclaiming they're already at the Vinitz Plains, amazed by the professor's powerful magic. But Chris is frozen, a cold sweat on his brow, because that wasn't him. He didn't cast any spell. Dolce mutters to herself that spatial magic is impossible for students, noticing a strange shadow over the professor's head. The horrifying realization dawns on Chris: they were summoned here by someone else. A system message confirms it. Teleportation by an unknown party is complete, right as a massive horn rabbit appears. Both Dolce and Angelina finally see what's behind their teacher and scream in pure terror. Chris is paralyzed by fear as a new system window appears. Is he really going to die here? He's completely surrounded by the hulking, monstrous rabbits, their red eyes glowing with malice. But he forces himself to get a grip, remembering the man whose body this is the real Chris Doughton. He asks himself what the legendary professor would do, knowing this would be less than child's play for him. Snapping out of his fear, he turns to his terrified students, his voice suddenly filled with cold authority. Angelina can't believe it. He wants them to train now. But Leo's eyes suddenly light up with understanding. Leo eagerly explains the situation. Their professor will handle the boss while they clear the minions. Chris is silently thanking him for this perfect excuse. While Dolce complains about being on cleanup duty, Angelina looks at her teacher with a newfound understanding. Her doubt melts away, replaced by trust. He must have a plan. She focuses, gathering her icy mana. The Ice Princess unleashes her power, conjuring a massive frost lance, ready for battle. And as Chris himself dashes forward, a blur of motion across the field, Angelina follows his lead, smashing her icy weapon into the first monstrous rabbit with a sickening crunch. Bell rallies the team, promising to cover healing as Michael begins channeling his own magic. But he's not just a healer, as a ball of raw flame ignites between his palms. Explosions rock the battlefield, and Chris watches with a proud smile as the kill counter soars. A dark, satisfied smirk spreads across his face. This is going even better than he'd planned. But just as Chris was reveling in his perfect plan, a massive shadow falls over him. He looks up into the drooling, buck-toothed maw of the area's field boss. A twisted, almost broken smile spreads across his face. He'd honestly rather just pass out. But no, he can't give up. His quest is on the line, and there might be a way to survive this. If he fails here, he'll die anyway, so getting eaten is, ironically, the most logical choice. But before the beast can strike, a desperate shout cuts through the air. Michael Foxon has thrown himself in front of the monster, trying to protect his professor. He screams out in pure terror, a last-ditch cry into the chaos. For Michael, time seems to stop. This can't be real. It just can't be happening. Tears stream down his face as he's forced to watch someone die right before his eyes again. As the beast's fangs crunch down, Michael's mind collapses into self-blame. Was it because he was a failure? Because he was so weak that this was all his fault? Bell grabs him, trying to drag him away from the scene, but he fights back, screaming for his professor. She holds him tight, explaining that it's too late that Professor Chris sacrificed himself for them. But Michael can't accept it, his face paling as he denies her words. He turns to her, a desperate, wild hope in his eyes, asking if her healing magic could still save him. But the memory of her sad apology cuts through the chaos. A final, crushing blow. His mind flashes back to a different time, when he nervously approached his professor. He remembers begging through his tears, admitting he had no right but pleading to become stronger. He'd vowed to be strong enough to take on all responsibility, a promise he now felt he had completely broken. He remembers that desperate promise, so certain the professor was just going to laugh at his pathetic plea. But Chris didn't laugh, a faint, almost imperceptible smile gracing his lips. Instead, he simply reassured Michael that he would become strong, the only person who had ever truly believed in him. That memory shatters as Dolce's voice cuts through the present chaos, insisting they fight their own way out. Watching them, Michael sees what true strength looks like, and he wants to give his all to protect it. Leo steps up to take the lead, unleashing a brilliant light spell he calls Sunrise. But as Belle grabs him, screaming that they need to run, Michael's mind spirals into self-loathing. He's completely unresponsive to her pleas, lost in his own world of grief and quiet sobs. A single, crushing thought consumes him. It wasn't the professor who should have died, and a sinister voice whispers from the depths of his despair, tempting him with the power he so clearly craves. Take his hand, the shadow coaxes, and with a broken smile, Michael agrees it should have been him. A dark, ethereal hand grips his own, the pact to become one nearly sealed in his despair. But suddenly, he's ripped back to reality, gasping in confusion, as he begs everyone to stop. He looks up to find his classmates staring, mouths agape, at Professor Chris Doughton, who is very much alive. Standing over the corpse of the Horn Rabbit King, Chris casually asks why they were running when the test wasn't even over. Leo, completely starstruck, gushes about the professor's genius plan to get eaten and attack from within, only for Chris to stare back blankly. He dryly reminds the boy that he forgot his objective and tried to flee, which is, a failing grade. Nika immediately panics and sprints back toward the training grounds, with a worried Belle chasing after her. But Dolce isn't fooled, stepping up to Chris with a smirk, telling him she knows there's more to this than meets the eye. She promises to figure out his little scheme, and all he can think is how this terrifyingly smart kid is his #1 threat. But his words do nothing to stop the waterworks, as both Michael and the Ice Princess, Angelina, just keep on crying. They're completely overwhelmed, calling his sacrifice unbelievable and wailing his name. Chris can only sweat drop, wondering why they're crying for him and silently judging this supposed heroine for being so weak. Angelina finally finds her voice, tearfully accusing him of being reckless when he clearly had the power to end it all from the start. He just wants to sigh. They've misunderstood everything, but he really doesn't feel like explaining the embarrassing truth. The reality was, there was no grand plan. The monster was just a glutton that burst after eating his C-rank magic-infused body. So he just crosses his arms, coldly reminding them that if they dislike his methods, they are free to leave. That threat works instantly. Both Michael and Angelina snap to attention, begging him not to abandon them. He's starting to feel a little guilty now, but just brushes it off, telling them to get going. Instead of explaining, he decides it's time for a different kind of lesson, about the very nature of magic power. He begins his lesson, explaining that monsters are born with weak magic and must absorb it from other life forms. And humans, with their S-rank magic crystals, are the ultimate delicacy. To them, he's a gourmet meal. The problem is, his magic power is so overwhelming that it's like trying to stuff a watermelon into a plastic bag, it just bursts. Now that the boss is dead, he knows the remaining monsters will come swarming for them. And right on cue, Dolce leaps into action, unleashing a powerful wave of water magic. Angelina follows up immediately, her eyes blazing as she summons a barrage of sharp icicles. The two spells combine perfectly, freezing the horde of horn rabbits solid as Chris watches, impressed by their synergy. Seeing the students have it handled, he decides to buff himself, equipping a monkey keychain to boost his agility. He dashes forward, feeling the rush of his new speed, only to get immediately flattened by a single rabbit, making him internally scream about how he's not invincible. Dolce gives a sheepish apology, admitting she thought she got them all, but one slipped by. Belle quickly steps in to handle it, promising his professor he'll train harder to not make such mistakes. But their training session is interrupted by a figure descending from the sky, a blindfolded man with a wide, confident smile. On the ground, a woman looks up in pure disbelief and joy, realizing the person she hoped to see has finally appeared. Her gaze then flicks to our Chris, still hooded on the ground, and she's suddenly confused. Who is this guy who looks like the story's villain? The blindfolded man lands with his dragon and rushes towards her, asking where she's been all this time. Hez practically giddy, pulling at his blindfold and exclaiming how much he's wanted to see her. Chris watches this bizarrely cheerful reunion, his guard immediately going up as he sees the woman's utterly love-struck expression. His eyes narrow with grim understanding. He knows exactly who these people are. And as he looks over his equally stunned students, he can only think one thing. Crap. The heroine panics, frantically insisting she has no idea who this man is, but he just smiles, asking why she isn't happy to see him. He even offers a playful apology for whatever happened back then, forcing Chris to realize he has to play along with this charade for now. Michael calls out to his professor, confused, as Chris simply turns away without a word. But beneath the hood, Chris's eyes are glowing with cold fury. His instincts are screaming at him. The students feel it too, realizing this stranger is dangerous and that they've never seen their professor so on edge. Especially not with the man commanding a massive dragon, leading them to wonder if he caused the horn rabbit stampede. The man then casually accuses Chris of killing his precious darlings, leaving Michael completely stunned. It clicks for Michael in a wave of cold dread. If it weren't for the professor, he would have been killed without a second thought. The protagonist reveals he was just checking on the young master's progress and thought about killing one of his friends. But he never expected her to show up, whispering with a chilling smile for her to try and see things from his perspective. As the man grabs Chris's face, Michael and Angelina can only watch in stunned silence. He taunts the professor, asking why he's been so quiet when he's the one who ruined his mission. Michael can't understand it. The professor's eyes are practically screaming murder, yet he's not fighting back. Then it hits him with a sickening lurch. Could it be because they're here? The man's aura alone is terrifying, and he knows Chris can't possibly fight and protect them at the same time. A wave of frustration washes over Michael. He feels like nothing but a burden. All his power is only good for finishing off weakened monsters, completely useless in a real fight. The protagonist then backs off, casually mentioning he won't get in Chris' way since Hez just following the master's orders. But he leans in close again, whispering that a simple good job would have made him happy. Michael sees it then, this isn't care. It's a twisted, selfish form of courtship, and the professor's eyes burn with hate. The protagonist keeps whispering his poison, reminding Chris of how he used to praise his face. But beneath his cloak, a quiet, defiant energy begins to glow in Chris's hand. Suddenly, a sword materializes out of nowhere, his bare hand stopping the blade cold. The professor's eyes burn with an intensity that promises nothing but pain. Michael and Angelina are floored what just happened. Where did that sword come from? His mind races that was creation magic, a power only a handful on the continent can wield. And yet, seeing the look on his professor's face, he realizes it's not impossible. Chris's voice is low and sharp, telling the protagonist to stop spouting such trash. But the man just smirks, asking if he's still holding a grudge before calling him my Chris. A cold, chilling smile creeps onto Chris's face. The game has just changed. The heroine clings to him, thinking she's finally been saved now that the 50th monster is dead. From afar, Michael watches them as a system window confirms the quest is complete. The protagonist receives his reward and immediately equips the legendary ancient sword. It materializes in his hand, a rusty sword said to be able to cut through almost anything. He tells Chris he'll leave for today, but offers his help any time through the master. But Chris's patience has snapped, warning him to disappear before he gets his mouth torn open. Unbothered, the protagonist gives a casual wave, leaps into the air, and flies off on a dragon. With the intruder gone, Chris finally turns back to face his students. Michael, Angelina, and Dolce are on the ground, gasping. His oppressive aura had drained all their mana. Visibly exhausted, Chris tells Angelina to send a message to the academy. They need a carriage home. Angelina and Dolce can't help but complain. If only their teacher had used his full power, it would have been over in a flash. But Michael knows the truth, quietly thinking how glad he is that Chris was there to save them. The next day, after all of Class X made it back safely, Chris wanders the academy halls, still exhausted. He can't stop thinking about what a mess his new life has become, and the man who caused it all. That bandaged guy, Maria, was never described in the novel, but his ability to control monsters is a huge red flag. Now he's being followed by someone so obviously suspicious, Chris can feel a storm brewing on the horizon. Just as he's lost in thought, a cheerful voice snaps him out of it. It's Eugene, the homeroom teacher for Class Y, wondering why Chris missed lunch. Oh, grade him. Meanwhile, the students of Class X have been summoned directly to the principal's office. But instead of answers, the principal makes a strange decision: reinforce the defenses and issue a total gag order. And of course, on top of everything else, he's been assigned a monitor, this smarmy, narrow-eyed teacher. Chris connects the dots instantly. The principal suspects has in league with the Demon Lord's army. This whole world is just one big fantasy cliché, from the defeated Demon King to the revenge-driven protagonist. But his immediate problem is Eugene, who's still cheerfully inviting him to lunch. Chris tells him to get lost, but the teacher just feigns innocence, asking if he was being too loud. He then leans in far too close, whispering about how everyone compliments his wonderful voice. Disgusted, Chris can't believe his luck. Is everyone in this world a complete weirdo? Eugene's smug reply is met with a much more direct suggestion from our fed-up transmigrator. But just then, a quest window pops up, a do-it-or-die mission, to befriend this very teacher. With a look of utter defeat, Chris grabs his arm, realizing he has no choice but to use this guy. Eugene cheerfully introduces himself as the teacher from the next class, smugly noting that skipping isn't an option. Chris internally panics, wondering how he can possibly get close to this guy while maintaining his Demon King persona. Then, a realization dawns: the quest requires a joint class, but it says nothing about actually being friends. With a loophole found, he aggressively grabs Eugene by the collar, done with any pretense of politeness. His dark energy flares as he accuses the teacher of wasting 5 precious minutes of his time. Eugene seems momentarily stunned, trying to process the sudden and intense hostility. But Chris is fueled by the memory of his own cringy backstory, a promise to a dying child. He physically blushes from the self-inflicted cringe, still gripping the very confused teacher's shirt. He issues his ultimatum. If Eugene wants to get close so badly, they should settle it with a match. With a confident smirk, he challenges him to pit their students against each other, knowing the principal's orders mean Eugene can't refuse. Eugene clarifies the challenge. A match between their students? Chris lays out his terms. If he wins, Eugene leaves him alone forever. The green-haired teacher simply smirks, a playful glint in his eyes as he considers the proposal. Instead of being intimidated, he bursts out laughing, finding the whole idea fun and suggesting his own condition. If he wins, Chris buys him dinner. The two men lock eyes, Chris sneering that there's no way he'll lose, while Eugene agrees that this sounds entertaining. With the deal struck, Chris internally screams with joy. His plan worked, while his face remains a mask of cold indifference. They settle on tomorrow afternoon, and with a quick confirmation, Chris is ready to get out of there. He turns and walks away, satisfied that the outcome doesn't matter as long as the joint class requirement is met. But honestly, as he glances back, he feels pretty confident. Against the nerdy characters in Class X, how could they possibly lose? Little does he know, one of his own students, Leo Beck, has been hiding nearby, overhearing the entire exchange. Leo peeks from behind a pillar, his eyes shining with emotion, completely misunderstanding the situation as his teacher showing faith in them. And just like that, the academy halls are filled with excited chatter. News of the upcoming clash between Class X and Class Y spreads like wildfire, with students buzzing about the notorious problem class. But the rumor mill has added its own special twist to the story. Nika Tot bursts through the doors, dramatically announcing the real stakes. Professor Eugene and Professor Chris's date is on the line. His classmates, including a very annoyed Angelina and a sleepy Dolce, are less than thrilled to be summoned for this emergency. They already knew about the competition, but figured there had to be a more serious reason for the meeting. Leaning in with a mischievous glint in his eye, Nika prepares to reveal the part they didn't hear. If their class loses, Professor Eugene gets to go on a date. The revelation sends a shockwave through the room. He replays the scene in his head, absolutely certain he heard Eugene asking Chris out to dinner. Angelina immediately questions his story, but Nika stands his ground, declaring that as a tot, He never, ever lies. Dolce pipes up, pointing out that this is the first real gossip they've ever had about the stoic Professor Eugene. Leo can hardly process it, muttering to himself about a date with their own teacher. Nika adds the final, crucial detail. Professor Chris snapped, vowing that Class X would win so she'd never have to see his face again. He rallies them, shouting that this means Professor Eugene actually believes in them. They have to make him proud. Michael's resolve hardens, his fists literally sparking with mana. Losing to Class Y is not an option. Hiding in her room, Chris is absolutely mortified, realizing this whole date rumor has spiraled completely out of control. And just like that, the day of the showdown arrives. Eugene and Chris make their entrance, a stark contrast of casual confidence and grim determination. Class X lines up, staring down an opposing class that outnumbers them by more than 10 to 1. Eugene calmly explains the format to his partner, a series of one-on-one duels. First to 3 wins takes it all. Eugene smirks, wondering aloud if a simple brawl wouldn't be more efficient. Chris internally scoffs. Her students have already mastered combo attacks thanks to that insane protagonist buff. He casually tells her to pick her first fighter, no need to stress over it. But Chris has a simple, brutal strategy. Just level up and overwhelm them with raw power. With newfound confidence, she calls out her first pick, Nika Tot. Nika, completely over the moon, pledges to return with either victory or death. The rules are simple. The fighters take their positions, and the first to have their Imagina hit 0 loses. With a sharp drop of his hand, Eugene signals for the first match to begin. Nika's opponent from Class Y explodes into action, launching a fierce opening assault. But Nika holds his ground, calmly exhaling as he prepares to counter. With a single, blinding flash of light, Nika unleashes his counter. He effortlessly cleaves through her attack, the difference in power absolutely staggering. The poor girl is sent flying backward, her sword tumbling from her grasp. She hits the ground hard, her Imagina depleted in an instant. It's over. The announcement rings out. Class X wins the first round, leaving Chris a little baffled by the sheer speed of it. She watches the student get helped up, wondering why no one else seems the least bit shocked. The crowd just murmurs amongst themselves, apparently expecting this level of skill from the Tot family. Even Nika's own classmates are amazed, questioning how a support class is hitting like a tank. But Chris feels a bit of relief she's not the only one freaking out. Eugene, clearly enjoying the show, smoothly asks her to name the next fighter. Chris puts on a thoughtful face, but inside, she's smirking. She already has her next champion picked out. With a smirk, Chris announces her next pick, Angelina. The Ice Princess looks up, clearly annoyed. But as she walks to the stage, she coolly informs Chris that another easy win is guaranteed. Nearby, Dolce yawns with boredom, complaining that they shouldn't bother with weaklings in a best of 3. She thinks they should just let her finish it, ignoring the poor guy behind her who's begging Chris for a chance. With a sharp, predatory grin, Dolce declares it's time for the second match to get underway. Angelina wastes no time, her eyes glowing as she conjures her signature ice magic into a formidable blade. Her opponent meets the attack, their weapons clashing in a brilliant explosion of frigid power. The crowd murmurs in awe, recognizing the classic, powerful magic of the genius sheriff family. But the exchange is brutally short. Angelina's ice sword smashes directly into the student's face. The match is called instantly. Angelina stands victorious over her fallen opponent, another win for Class X. Chris has to physically restrain herself from praising Angelina, who looks ridiculously smug, just like her family's dog. A sharp glare from the professor is all it takes for the Ice Princess to blush and stammer that she's on her way back. Eugene smirks confidently beside Chris. With one more win, this whole thing is over. With a subtle, knowing smile, Chris agrees it's time to end this cleanly and calls for Dolce to step up. But before she can even finish, a hand shoots out, stopping her cold as Dolce calls out her name. Suddenly, the students are in an uproar, with Dolce clinging to a very confused Michael Foxon, promising to tie him down. Nika Tot panics, yelling at Chris for trying to bail on them for something called a date. Chris, who has literally no idea what a date even is, just gives them a sly look and asks if they've all lost their nerve. Dolce fires back that it's not fair. It would be against the rules for their professor to fight in a one-on-one. But Chris knows a little secret. Dolce herself is hardly a one-on-one fighter, thanks to her invisible twin sister. Dolce leans in, whispering her little secret, wondering what on earth Chris is scheming. She then throws herself at Michael, begging him to win in her place. Chris gets it now, she's trying to score points with the protagonist. A classic move to let the hero have his moment. Chris figures letting him lose once wouldn't be so bad. She snaps Michael out of his stupor, calling his name with authority. With a sharp gaze, she asks him if he's truly prepared for this. A fire ignites within him as his hand clenches into a determined fist. He roars back, vowing to pour everything he has into securing a victory. Chris can't help but crack a small, confident smile. It's just a student match after all. The countdown begins, and Michael faces his opponent for the final round. But the other student just sneers, calling him a cursed, disgusting commoner who should be grateful for the chance to fight him. And just like that, Chris freezes, realizing he'd forgotten a crucial detail about the story's early arcs. The purple-haired noble taunts Michael for his silence, demanding a reaction. Chris grimaces. He knew bullies existed in this setting, but this timing couldn't be worse. Then, the noble goes for the lowest blow, asking how it feels to be at the academy after killing his own mother. The words hit Michael like a physical strike, and the curse mark on his face begins to stir. His opponent just smirks, pointing out how the creepy curse is actually moving. Overwhelmed, Michael clutches his head, begging him to stop as dark energy begins to leak out. Chris's eyes widen in alarm. This wasn't an awakening, this was something else entirely. A primal fear grips the bully as he sees the ominous aura erupt from Michael, a clear sign of someone going berserk. But his arrogance wins out, and he scoffs, telling Michael to hold still so he can end it in one hit. This is bad. Chris knows he has to stop this, screaming for the match to be cancelled. But it's too late. A catastrophic explosion of dark energy erupts from Michael. The onlookers can only stare in utter shock, completely bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Chris, however, looks on with a grim certainty. He knew it was over for that bully. Michael's humanity is gone, replaced by a monstrous form of pure, corrupted energy. The beast roars and charges, and the bully can only scramble backward, screaming in pure terror. Just then, a system window pops up, giving Chris an absurd new quest: stop the protagonist's rampage. He grits his teeth in sheer frustration. The system is always pushing these impossible demands on him. Still, he leaps into action, banking on the one saving grace. This is a test where no one can die. As he moves, he notices Michael's monstrous face is crying a tear of blood, a sign that some reason might still be left within. But before Chris can act, another teacher, Eugene, rushes past him, determined to handle this himself. He unleashes a powerful binding spell, wrapping the rampaging Michael in chains of golden light. For a second, it seems to work, but the monster's demonic eyes just burn with even greater fury. With a single roar of raw power, the divine chains are shattered into nothing. Michael's arm lashes out like a whip, brutally slamming Eugene and sending him flying. The other faculty members cry out in horror, realizing their own magic is being completely nullified. Amidst the spreading panic, however, one figure takes a slow, deliberate step forward. Chris now stands alone before the monster, becoming the center of everyone's attention. He admits to himself the terror is almost paralyzing, that he nearly broke character and fled. But seeing that flicker of recognition, he knows this is his opening. The real Michael is still in there. With a decisive step, Chris closes the distance, not with an attack, but with pure intent. He slams his hand onto the monster's chest, a shockingly bold and fearless move. The creature gasps, its rage faltering as it's forced to look at the man before it. Chris presses his forehead against Michael's, a direct challenge to the demon within. He asks him a simple question: is this twisted power the strength he truly desired? The demonic shell begins to crumble, and Michael, in tears, can only utter his teacher's name. Chris explains that fate means nothing. With true resolution, anyone can be reborn strong. That promise finally lands, a spark of hope igniting in Michael's eyes. As Michael lets go, a piece of Chris's cloak tears away, a small price for a saved soul. Chris turns his back, offering one last command: come back, because there won't be a next time. Michael can only watch as his master turns his back, the command to return still ringing in his ears. Chris strides away, leaving the entire chaotic scene behind him without a second thought. But the moment he's alone, a searing pain rips through his chest, the backlash from the demonic energy. System notifications flood his vision. Quest complete. Has finally cleared all of Chapter 1's objectives. His rewards are a full map of the academy and a rotten mandrake root, a recovery item with some interesting side effects. He admits he's still worried about Michael, the image of that monstrous form seared into his memory. Shaking it off, he arrives at a familiar ornate doorway, the infirmary. He peeks inside, confirming his target is resting in one of the beds. He knows it doesn't fit his cold persona, but that whole ordeal felt like reliving the trauma of losing a disciple. Just then, a soft voice breaks the silence, calmly stating that she knew he would come. It's Eugene, sitting up in bed with a disarming smile, calling Chris a kind person and inviting him in. Chris steps fully into the room, his expression grim as he tells Eugene he did something incredibly foolish. Eugene just smirks, casually asking if Chris had finally noticed his reckless move. He recalls the moment he grabbed onto the rampaging Michael, realizing he'd jumped in with no defense whatsoever. But he just beams, explaining he was confident he wouldn't die, and that earning a favor from Chris was a cheap price to pay. Chris is absolutely fuming at this logic, while Eugene smoothly changes the subject to their bet. With a deadpan expression, Chris bluntly informs him that, of course, he lost. Eugene pauses for a moment, letting the loss sink in with a thoughtful expression. Then he's all smiles again, grabbing Chris's arm and offering to treat him to celebrate the master's victory. Chris is left speechless, realizing this bastard is conveniently claiming a head injury has made him forget the bet's actual stakes. Completely done with Eugene's nonsense, Chris has had enough. He storms out of the room, slamming the door shut on the insufferable recovery patient. Alone at last, his mind races. Was he somehow stuck in a dating sim? Why was this happening? Suddenly, a massive system window appears, revealing that the story branches from this point forward. He stares at the options, utterly bewildered by the choice between a Demon Lord and Holy Emperor route. Deciding to start at the top, he reaches out and taps the first option to see what it's all about. The Demon Lord route reveals his mission: to act as a spy and recruit the protagonist, Michael Foxen, for world conquest. So, one path is to turn the hero into a villain's pawn. Chris ponders the alternative. The Holy Emperor route is the complete opposite: betray the demons and train Michael to become a holy knight. With the two main paths laid out, his attention drifts to the final, ominous option: do not choose. The third option is a trap. Just as he expected, a path that turns both factions against him. He weighs his options. The Holy Emperor route involves annoying saints, but the Demon Lord path would make that smug Eugene his enemy. Neither choice is ideal, but backed into a corner, he realizes he has to commit to something. So with a final, decisive tap, he locks in his decision. The system confirms his selection, wishing him good luck on this new, irreversible path. A dark smile spreads across his face. There's no turning back now. But he doesn't regret it for a second, a manic energy filling his eyes. He's fully committed, ready to embrace whatever chaos this choice brings. Back in his room, a lone butterfly flutters by, a quiet omen of the future. After all, the flap of a wing can cause a storm, and he's ready for the hurricane. And the very next day, Chris is hit with a dose of reality, screaming internally that he's the main character, so why is he being fired? A fellow instructor casually walks up, cheerfully asking if it's true he's taking a leave of absence starting tomorrow. She confirms the principal told her he'd be gone for a month, and Chris can barely process what he's hearing. Alone in his room, he finally starts to connect the dots, the reason for this sudden forced vacation. The system's warning flashes in his mind. Those aligned with the Holy Emperor will now be wary of him. He clenches his fist, the pieces clicking into place. It was because of the route he chose. The system had warned him he'd be flagged as a suspicious person, and it seems the consequences were immediate. He collapses onto his bed, groaning. Still, the other choices were far too risky to even consider. Pledging blind loyalty to the Holy Emperor was unbearable, and serving the Demon Lord was just not an option. So, unable to even pathetically beg them to reconsider, he decides he might as well enjoy this rare vacation. But just as he resigns himself to his fate, the system chimes in with an all-new, ridiculous quest. It's a Parent Master Day, and failure to successfully host it means becoming a freshly deceased corpse. Chris's mind completely short-circuits. A Parent Master Day? Is the system trying to mock him? He starts to panic, wondering what part of his brutal training regimen is even fit for public viewing. And then the even bigger problem hits him. Hez on forced leave. Hez technically unemployed. Suddenly, this so-called vacation is no longer a break, but a 72-hour countdown to his death. With a fire in his eyes, he vows to get his job back and return to the academy, purely to survive. Meanwhile, news of his absence is already spreading among the students of Class X. Leo is completely shocked to hear about it, and even Belle seems unsettled by the sudden development. Dolce, however, just scoffs, casually suggesting their master probably got fed up and bailed on them. Her voice is dripping with disdain, convinced their master just got tired of them and left. But Angelina won't stand for it, calling it cowardly to talk trash when he's not around. Dolce just smirks back, mocking how unconvincing the Ice Princess looks when she's all flustered and red-faced. Leo quickly jumps in, trying to calm everyone down by suggesting a more logical reason for his absence. Then, unable to hold it back, he shouts the truth. Their master took full responsibility for the recent incident. The revelation hangs in the air, stunning the others into silence. For Nika, though, the words hit differently. He knew his rampage had caused a stir, but he thought it was all over. Now he understands Chris took the punishment in his place. A profound sense of guilt and gratitude washes over him. He hasn't even properly thanked the man yet. With a new fire in his eyes, Nika realizes he can't just sit here. He has to do something. With newfound determination, Nika vows that he will absolutely bring their master back. He immediately sets off, his stride filled with purpose. At the same time, a frantic Leo bursts in on the temporary master, shouting that he has an urgent message for the principal. She's instantly annoyed, trying to correct his informal address, but Leo has no time for that. He screams that Michael is on the verge of losing control again. She just sighs, completely over it. She only accepted these problem children from Class X because of their famous parents. How long will this farce continue? Fine, she thinks. Another rampage it is. Let's go. But as she and Leo open the door, they're greeted by the sight of Nika, seemingly writhing in agony. Turns out, it's just a performance, with Dolce theatrically coaching him to put more passion into it. While Angelina and Belle blush, the temporary master can only think one thing: what a terrible actor. Michael tries to calm everyone down, explaining that there's a magic alert system for exactly this situation, and right now, there are 0 alerts. So technically, he says with an awkward blush, there's no problem. But Leo isn't hearing it, still clinging to the teacher, screaming that Michael can't give up, only Master Chris can stop him. The temporary master finally snaps, her face twisting in rage. Chris, Chris, Chris! That's all she ever hears. She forces a grim smile, resigning herself to this chaos. Just gotta endure these brats until their influential parents show up. Little did she know, the man at the center of all this drama was miles away at an inn called Frog's Rest. Inside, a lone figure sips from a goblet, his presence weighing down the entire room. It's Chris, and the innkeeper has never seen a guest quite like him in all his 50 years. For 3 straight hours, this man has been sitting alone, scowling, monopolizing the floor with his dark aura. The atmosphere is so intimidating that not a single other customer dares to even approach him. The bartender sweats, wondering about the source of that suffocating purple aura. He starts to panic. Could this man be the demon lord in disguise? Is his inn about to be history? Just then, the bell on the door chimes, and he instinctively looks up. He forces a smile, trying his best to welcome the new arrival. But the moment he sees who's walked in, his professional facade completely shatters. It's the renowned Duke Sheriff, Angelina's father, a man of immense power and prestige. The poor bartender can barely stammer out the Duke's title, his mind reeling. A playful voice then chides the Duke for removing his hood and causing such a scene. It's Natasha Tot, Nika's mother, grinning as she points out how he's left everyone speechless. The Duke coolly denies any seductive intentions, but Natasha just smirks, fully aware of his charm. Natasha tells them both to knock it off, but another voice cuts through the tension. A small, red-haired man complains that his head hurts and asks if getting rooms isn't the priority here. He turns to the counter, and the bartender breathes a sigh of relief, thinking he's finally dealing with someone normal. The man asks for 3 rooms, casually offering 3 high-grade magic crystals as payment. The bartender's mind short-circuits that's enough money to buy several inns, and did he just say he's been a recluse for 80 years? Even Natasha is stunned, wondering what kind of day it is to have all these powerful people gathering here. She turns to the newcomer, Henry Bright, saying there's something she's been wondering. But as Henry turns to listen, a cold presence makes the air crackle. Duke Sheriff's hand is already on his sword, ready to draw at a moment's notice. But Natasha's hand shoots out, clamping down on Chris's sword arm before he can fully draw. She coolly informs him that his killing intent has been leaking all over the place. From the bar, Duke Sheriff and Henry watch on as Natasha asks if they have some business with her group. The Duke, completely unbothered by the standoff, calmly takes a sip of his drink. Natasha's grip remains firm, a silent challenge to the man she's just disarmed. Chris glares daggers at her, warning her to get lost unless she wants her head bashed in. A dangerous, mocking smile spreads across Natasha's face, utterly unimpressed. She wonders aloud if maybe his head will be the one to fall off first. And as the 2 powerhouses face off, the bartender decides he's officially quitting the inn business. But Natasha's grip is like a vice, pinning his sword to his side. His knuckles turn white, a silent battle of wills playing out over the hilt. And internally, Chris is just losing it, wondering how running from a cockroach led to this. He was so close to just giving up, maybe begging the principal for help, when a voice calls out. He glances over, and his blood runs cold. It's Duke Sheriff. And he's not alone. The Knight Commander and the Master of the Magic Tower are with him. The horrifying realization dawns on him. This is a parent-teacher conference. He immediately tries to make himself small, to become an insignificant bug in the corner. But his killing intent is practically screaming, and Natasha's grip tightens with a sharp warning. She turns to him, her voice laced with accusation, saying his murderous aura has been leaking for a while. Chris freezes, his instinct screaming that if he averts his eyes for even a second, he's dead. This woman isn't just an honor student's mother. She's the kingdom's most renowned knight. She is Natasha Tot, and she looks at him with disdain, asking why he hasn't drawn his sword. He can't. His blade has only 3 uses, and he refuses to waste one on this confrontation. A desperate thought forms. She's a knight. As long as he doesn't draw his weapon, she won't attack. But just as he thinks he's figured her out, Natasha sheathes her blade, deciding to try a bolder approach. She casually picks up a glass, remarking that the wine is better than drain water from the Red Kingdom. Her eyes drift to his sword as she muses that if he drew it, this whole area would be blown to bits. And what a shame that would be, since she wouldn't get to drink this fine wine next year. Leaning in close, she whispers for him not to take it so seriously, leaving Chris sweating and utterly confused. Suddenly, Natasha just cracks up, a wide grin spreading across her face. She can't believe he was actually worried about the inn, finding his concern absolutely hilarious. Her playful demeanor switches to formal as she introduces herself properly. Natasha Tot, the Scarlet Knight. Chris quickly backpedals, agreeing that a knight who can't consider their surroundings is shameful. Taking a liking to him, she decides to apologize by buying out the entire inn's wine stock. Her generosity turns into an ambush when she spots Duke Sheriff and Henry Bright, calling them over to join. Chris is horrified, realizing he's just been roped into an all-night drinking party with high-ranking knights. As the sun sets, Natasha is ecstatic, but our poor boy can only scream internally for someone to save him. Time blurs as the night wears on, the light from the tavern window fading into darkness, and by morning, Chris is utterly destroyed, face-planting into his bed feeling like he's about to die. He groans, barely holding himself together after that nightmare of a drinking session, but at least he got on their good side. Just as he was plotting his escape, Natasha cheerfully informs him they're all heading to the academy together. She explains they're in a rush because of the shy Duke Sheriff, who's apparently got a severe case of social anxiety. He supposedly insists on arriving at parent observation day before anyone else, but Chris isn't buying that flimsy excuse for a second. If he was that anxious, he just wouldn't show up. No, they came all this way for one reason: to see the protagonist, Michael Foxon, who wasn't at the academy. Rumors have already spread about the student who turned into something inhuman and took down a teacher. As they walk, Natasha calls out to him, noticing how pale he looks after their party. She grabs his arm, telling him to lean on her if he feels dizzy, her concern catching him completely off guard. He wonders if his drunk act was a little too convincing, as she seems genuinely worried about him now. Surrounded by his new companions, Chris can't help but feel like Hez being escorted like a prisoner. Just then, a light drizzle begins to fall, urging them to hurry. As they near the academy, Natasha continues her one-sided chatter, with Chris thinking she's the only one talking, but his attention is suddenly pulled away by a strange disturbance up ahead. Something bursts from the foliage, an ambush, and from the looks of it, a kidnapping attempt aimed at him. He tries to get a better look but conveniently trips on the wet cobblestone. Natasha catches him with a smug grin, teasingly asking if he needs her to carry him, but Chris sees the shadows of beasts closing in, yelling at her to be silent. In a blinding flash, Natasha unleashes a powerful blast of magic, intercepting the attack herself. Chris's eyes widen in disbelief. That was light magic, the signature of the legendary Tot family. But the supposed ambush is none other than Nika, sword drawn, demanding to know why this stranger is attacking his teacher. Before Chris can react, Natasha playfully grabs him, smug that her identity has been revealed in such a dramatic fashion. She teases that it seems they've both taken a liking to Chris, who realizes he's not the only one who snuck onto campus. And just like that, the rest of his students appear: Angelina, Dolce, and Belle, all frantic with worry and relief. Chris sighs, realizing his devoted students really did climb over the wall just for him. With his arms crossed, he demands they explain themselves in detail. Michael Foxon steps forward, his expression filled with genuine panic and concern as he calls out to his teacher. He looks Chris in the eyes, stammering out an apology. Michael confesses they all thought he'd abandoned them and left for good, so they came out to find him. He explains they just wanted to see him one last time, a speech so dramatic Chris can't help but mock it internally. Chris scolds them for breaking the rules, but with Natasha smirking behind him, he impatiently tells Michael to get to the point. Backed by his hopeful classmates, Michael officially asks Chris to come back and be their professor for Class 5. The request leaves Chris utterly confused. He can't understand why they're so attached when he's barely done anything. He thinks to himself that these students are weird, but their passion makes him want to be a better teacher for them. A small, resigned smile breaks through as he accepts his fate. These kids are going to be a lot of trouble. Michael, Angelina, and Belle are ecstatic, cheering that it's time to head back to the academy together. and it seems things were handled back on campus, with Natasha confronting the young lady who forced Chris out. Even Duke's sheriff applied pressure, arguing that Chris is the only one fit to teach his granddaughter, Angelina. Thanks to the combined weight of the influential parents, Chris's return to work was easily secured. But now he's back in the classroom with a new problem. He still has no idea what to teach them. While Chris lets his students study independently, the observing parents find his style unique, but he isn't worried about them anymore. They've come to an understanding. His real problem lies with Angelina, who's struggling against a dark, overwhelming pressure, and the cause of his other major headache is sitting right there, Duke's sheriff, Angelina's father. He might look nonchalant, but Chris knows this is the man who forged the Ice Princess. Suddenly, a trembling hand rises as Angelina meekly asks to go to the bathroom. Chris gives a silent nod of approval, letting her rise from her seat. But as she stands, a wave of sickness hits her, and she stumbles forward in a daze. She collapses to her knees, Michael rushing over to see what's wrong. From the back of the room, her father's expression hardens. He can sense something is very strange. Her father watches, a cold knot forming in his stomach. This overwhelming weakness isn't the Angelina he raised. Michael is the first to react, dashing out of the classroom as he calls out her name. Chris, however, is a little less concerned, cynically wondering if she's just running off for another smoke. Still, with a quiet sigh, he decides he should probably go and check on her. But as he stands, Natasha Tot immediately challenges him, asking if he's just going to abandon his guests. Without missing a beat, Chris coldly declares that the class is over and tells everyone to get out. The observers are left baffled by the sudden dismissal, though Henry seems unbothered, suggesting a drink. Chris follows the faint trail of her presence, hearing pained groans from behind a heavy classroom door. He pauses just outside, listening intently to the sounds of her struggle within. It seems she hated being seen so weak that she hid in the first empty room she could find. And just like that, a quest completion screen pops up, offering him some truly questionable rewards. He scoffs at the bizarre options, wondering why the system's gifts are getting so strange. But he quickly dismisses it. There are far more important things to deal with right now. He bursts through the door to find Angelina Seraph, crumpled on the floor and sobbing. He lets out a weary sigh, his expression hardening with resolve. Then, he speaks a name that should be impossible for him to know, Andante Seraph. She jolts upright, her eyes wide with disbelief and terror, asking how he could possibly know that name. And Chris knows he's just uncovered her deepest, most guarded secret. You see, the Ice Princess Angelina is actually a boy named Andante, a plot twist that set the original novel's forums on fire. He was an illegitimate child with little talent, forced to live disguised as a girl to survive. Andante was the forgotten son, cast aside for his talented younger sister, the real Angelina. But when she mysteriously disappeared, his father needed a puppet, and Andante was brutally remade in her image. Chris recalls the grim details from the novel, the constant pain from magic used to stunt his growth, and the severe trauma that followed. Through tears, Andante pleads with him, convinced that if his father finds out, Chris will be the next one to vanish. He's not afraid for himself, but for his professor. A reasonable fear, as Duke Sheriff was known for silencing anyone who knew the truth. But this desperate warning only makes Chris scoff. Does he really look like someone who can be messed with? A cold smirk forms on his face. It's time to re-establish his ruthless reputation and secure a new ally in the process. He knows the Sheriff family walks a tightrope, neutral between the great powers. Just like him, they're an insurance policy, and Chris has just figured out how to cash it in. He lays down his terms, calling him Andante, and demands that he lead Class X to victory in the school tournament. The best way to control powerful people, Chris explains, is to make them owe you a debt. He makes his offer: lead Class X to victory, and Hell use his novel knowledge to find Andante's lost sister. The promise leaves Andante speechless as a new quest materializes, locking Chris into this very path. The midterm exam is a grand tournament, and the prize is a trophy holding the powerful Eye of Flame. Chris knows he needs that very mana stone to locate the original heroine, Angelina. He gathers Andante and Michael, confirming they understand the midterms are a competition. Then he drops the bomb. This year's tournament won't be separated by grade level. It's an all-out war. Having already made a bold promise to Duke Sheriff, Chris doubles down on his deal with Andante. Andante hesitates, his eyes filled with doubt. How could he possibly trust someone like Chris? But Chris just smirks, his quiet confidence unshakable. He always means what he says. Chris looks utterly drained, admitting his prior confidence was based on fighting kids their own age, not the Academy's best. Michael immediately starts to panic, terrified of facing the upperclassmen, but still promises to give it his all. But Chris cuts through the doubt with cold certainty, clenching his fist. No. They aren't just trying. They will win. With her family's honor on the line, Andante's eyes blaze with determination, vowing to lead them to victory herself. Before he can even start planning their training, however, Chris notices a strange silence from one member of their group. He calls out to Dolce, whose usual sharp tongue is nowhere to be found. Even as Leo frets about his senior brothers, she remains completely still, her expression unreadable, lost in some dark thought of her own. Trying to lighten the mood, Leo randomly brings up a rumor about a ghost that supposedly haunts the academy. While the others get creeped out, Chris's mind connects the dots. He remembers a grim detail from the novel People Have Died Here Before. His gaze falls back on the silent Dolce, and in that moment, he understands. Something terrible must have happened to those twins. A few days later, the sound of clashing weapons echoes across the training grounds. Leo is already on his knees, begging Angelina for a break from their grueling practice. He even points out that Dolce hasn't shown up in days, blaming their harsh new regimen. Chris watches from the side, a thought nagging him. Her absence is more than just fatigue. This is a real problem. They need 7 people for the tournament, and losing one is not an option. He realizes she hasn't been slacking off, but wandering the school garden, looking for something or someone. His search leads him to a secluded spot as the rain begins to pour. There, hiding behind a tree, he finds Dolce, crying out into the storm for someone named Gabbana. And just like that, everything falls into place. Her sister, Gabbana Bright, has disappeared. The truth is, Gabbana died a year ago, but her ghost has remained by Dolce's side ever since until now. As Dolce weeps for her lost sister, Chris knows this is a problem he has to solve. He startles her, grabbing her arm and demanding to know what's really going on. For a second, she looks almost touched, thinking he actually cared that she skipped class. But Chris immediately shuts that down, scoffing that this isn't some personal act of kindness. He cuts straight to the heart of it, asking where she lost Gabbana Bright's soulstone. Her shock quickly melts into a wry, almost impressed grin. She admits she underestimated him, amazed that he could sense the stone's unique energy. Sense it? Please. He just remembers the original novel where she confessed everything to the protagonist. Just before Gabbana died, her soul was accidentally trapped within a high-quality monostone. This soulstone allowed her to live on as a ghost, but only visible to Dolce, the one holding it. Through tears, Dolce explains that she woke up and Gabbana was just gone, finally revealing the source of her despair. Chris processes this. The soulstone is not only precious, but without it, Dolce's magic is cut in half. There's no time to waste on sympathy. He simply tells her to come with him, his solving this now. He already knows the answer, remembering the hostile red dot that flickered on his map right next to her. A wicked grin spreads across his face. Some unlucky monster swallowed the soulstone, turning this problem into a perfect field trip. Plodding through the heavy rain, Chris leads the way into the woods. He's brought his students, who are utterly confused, with Leo complaining about being dragged to the garden pond. Belle notices Dolce has gone deathly pale, sensing something is deeply wrong. Chris knows exactly why. Dolce can feel the soulstone's familiar energy coming from the rushing water nearby. He turns to his class, his voice cutting through the downpour, and tells them to prepare for battle. And just as he finishes his sentence, the water erupts violently before them. A hulking lizard monster bursts out, dripping a dark, viscous fluid as it immediately lunges for the students. The substance splatters against the rocks, sizzling and melting them on contact. It's pure acid. Andante immediately takes command, ordering everyone to keep their distance and prepare ranged attacks. But Dolce is completely unresponsive, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek as she stares blankly ahead. Chris watches her, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. This rainy environment is perfect for her water magic, but she's useless. He steps in front of her, his voice sharp and direct, asking if she's really lost her nerve now of all times. He remembers her during that sparring match with Michael, so confident and carefree. What happened to that girl? Then, a chilling, distorted groan echoes from the monster it's trying to say her name. Dolce. The horrifying truth hits her like a physical blow. The monster ate her twin soulstone and is now possessed by her sister's spirit. A memory flashes back Dolce's twin sister, Gabbana, confiding in Michael about a frustration that always haunted her. She explains that no matter how much she insisted her sister was human, everyone called her undead. Rumors of her sister's unique soulstone spread, and soon, greedy mages from the magic tower tried to steal it. Back in the present, Chris recalls Dulce's cover story about it being a demon lord's soul, knowing it was a lie. He shatters her paralysis with a blunt statement, telling her that monster is not her sister. Dolce flinches, his words hitting her with the force of a physical blow. He presses on, asking if her sister could use magic because if so, she could only have been human. A tearful, bitter laugh escapes her lips. He's awful for saying the words she always longed to hear at a time like this. But his cruel logic works, and Dolce's resolve hardens as she turns to face the monster. Gathering a vortex of water magic, she apologizes for her family drama and vows to end this now. With a fierce cry, Dolce unleashes a torrent of magic, warning everyone to brace themselves. Chris watches her, a smirk playing on his lips. There's no doubt in his mind this match is theirs. The scene shifts to a quiet, sunlit room the next day. He relaxes, thinking back on their monster hunt. Thanks to that, their odds of winning the tournament are looking much better. He recalls how much the others struggled to take that lizard down, though it was understandable for a beast loaded with so many magic stones. What was truly strange was that the stones were already refined. He wonders if that bandaged guy, Eugene, had something to do with it. Head quickly swiped the real stones and shared them with the team, hoping they'd have at least some effect. But even with the power-up, he knows they can't relax just yet. The second-year students are the real problem. One of them in particular, a character named Ryan, was a major figure in the original novel. This kid is a known problem child, but Chris knows the real trouble lies elsewhere as he quietly approaches a door. Suddenly, the classroom door bursts open, and the problem child himself, Ryan, storms in, demanding a fight. He declares himself the king of legend and challenges them, wagering their precious red hearts. Speak of the devil, Chris thinks, completely unimpressed by this over-the-top display. Ryan points dramatically, recognizing Chris with some ridiculous title, but our teacher is just annoyed by the brat's disrespect. Leo Beck immediately wants to toss the guy out for trying to spy on them, but Chris calmly tells his class to stand down. He chides the second year for having too much free time, but Ryan just scoffs, trying to praise Chris while being subtly pushed back. The simple flick of a finger is all it takes to stop him, and as Chris's eyes flare red, the blustering student quickly backs down. Chris leans in, his voice low, and demands one simple thing from the troublemaker: respect. Ryan, of course, couldn't care less about such annoying rules, and grabs his collar. But Chris effortlessly seizes his arm, his grip like iron, mocking the very idea that a wannabe thug could ever be the strongest. Chris smirks, realizing the key to conquering Ryan is to conquer his fans, leaving the purple-haired punk sputtering. Ryan tries to save face, declaring Chris isn't worth his time and that his special emperor eyes see through any bluff. Our teacher just scoffs at the kid wearing an eye patch with perfect vision and decides to pull out a ridiculous new reward. With a flash of golden light, he equips the super popular guy's cape, activating its radiant light ability. The dazzling aura is too much for Ryan, who stumbles back as Chris mockingly asks if he can even see this. Cranking the halo effect to its max, Chris unleashes a punch that's less about force and more about overwhelming charisma. The blow sends Ryan's face planting squarely into Chris' chest, leaving him completely stunned and speechless. A simple, almost lazy flick to the forehead makes the tough guy yelp in pathetic surprise. Chris leans in, telling him to drop the act and just go home already, his words cutting deeper than any blade. The wannabe emperor is left a blushing, stammering mess, as Chris internally calls it a win, questionable methods aside. Defeated and red-faced, Ryan declares that next time, he'll make Chris truly see his power. Chris inwardly scoffs at the empty threat, before a chilling realization hits him. Did he just trigger a rival's awakening plotline? He dismisses the thought and begins to walk away, trying to forget the whole mess. But before he can get far, a voice calls out to him, addressing him as teacher. It's Eugene, another instructor, who approaches with a disarming smile that immediately sets Chris on edge. Eugene mentions he was Ryan's homeroom teacher last year and couldn't handle him either, so it's an old problem. He then smoothly proposes they exchange student information over dinner, but Chris shuts him down with a blunt refusal. Unfazed, Eugene pushes a neatly wrapped pink gift into his hands anyway. Chris finds himself holding a bento box, which Eugene calls a simple token of his feelings. He eyes the package with suspicion. Not only do the rules forbid such gifts, but for a neutral party like him, it could very well be poisoned. Eugene feigns a pout, insisting he worked so hard on it and would never put anything weird inside. But Chris has no time for this. He turns away, his mind already racing with plans to win the tournament. The other instructor's voice follows him, asking if something is troubling him with an unsettling sweetness. He offers some friendly advice, suggesting that quiet places are best for deep thought, a sinister smile creeping across his face. On the surface, it's simple words, but Chris feels a jolt. It's like Eugene isn't talking to Chris, but to his true self. Then, Eugene offers to share his secret base, a place perfect for a teacher in need of solitude. He tells him to just follow the map, assuring him that absolutely no one will be able to find him there. The location he suggests is the old dormitory, a building that's been abandoned for years. Chris is completely thrown, Who is this man, and what does he really know? He thought Eugene was just being cryptic before, but now he realizes this instructor is dangerously aware of his secrets. A sudden realization hits Chris. Eugene isn't just talking about any old building. He's referencing a dungeon from the original story. The old dorm is a place of legend, a dungeon that only permits entry to souls who have never experienced defeat in their life. He remembers a crucial detail from the novel. Even the protagonist was turned away, having forgotten his one true loss against the Demon King. Chris tries to downplay it, telling Eugene he never considered the place important since it was just a brief flashback. But Eugene's sickeningly sweet smile remains. He wonders why the instructor spoke to him in such a specific, threatening way. The comment about the map preventing him from getting caught, it sends a shiver down his spine. Is Eugene part of the system, or another transmigrator? He swallows, trying to get his racing thoughts under control. Whoever this guy is, he needs to keep a level head. Feigning ignorance, Chris dismisses him and turns to leave, telling the instructor to get lost. Eugene just laughs, cheerfully promising he'll be busy for a while, but to call if he gets lonely, much to Chris' annoyance. And so, despite knowing it's a trap, Chris finds himself standing before the looming shadow of the old dormitory that night. He really didn't want to be here, but word on the street is that the Lion Brat teamed up with the top third years. Chris sighs, knowing this upcoming tournament is completely stacked against first years like him. He needs a cheat code to stand a chance, and the only way to get one is from a dungeon as his hand pushes the door open. A brilliant flash of light blinds him the moment he steps inside. He finds himself standing alone in a vast, ethereal white void. This is the dungeon? It seems dungeon just means an unknown area in this world, but still, there's absolutely nothing here. Then, a strange voice welcomes him, calling him its child and saying it's been waiting for him. His eyes drift to the side as a giant, floating figure appears, expressing relief that he hadn't forgotten this place. With a little bounce, the figure fully reveals itself. It's the monkey keychain from his past life. Chris is completely thrown, holding up a hand to stop it. He demands to know what on earth is going on. The little monkey strikes a pose, cheerfully announcing it's a support entity sent by the Earth God. Chris processes this. A system quest about the Earth God's request confirming its words, though some of them were strangely inaudible. His expression darkens instantly, an intimidating aura flaring as he glares at the cowering keychain. Is this thing the reason for all his suffering? He's completely unimpressed by the classic meet the supreme being trope and growls for it to get to the point. The monkey explains it can't tell him everything, but the Earth God is in some kind of trouble, a situation described with more words Chris can't hear. And if he fails at his task, things will get complicated. He wonders if his human body in this novel just can't process divine language. It claims it had to use a loophole just to appear, all because it wanted to help him, feeling he wasn't given a fair shot. Floating closer, the monkey offers a solution. When he's in trouble, it can use a special power to make things happen. All the fight drains out of Chris as he slumps against the creature, finally getting it. This thing is here to grant him a wish. A wide, greedy grin spreads across his face. A real cheat code. He immediately makes his demand. Let him use magic. But the monkey immediately shuts him down, claiming it can't interfere with illegal players. Chris is livid. He never asked for any of this. Okay, fine. If magic is a no-go, then just raise his strength. But that's apparently too hard as well. A murderous aura pours off Chris, so terrifying that the little monkey starts to panic, begging him to stop. What exactly can this thing even do? He reins in his anger, trying a different approach. Can it at least give him an item to help with the current quest? The keychain perks up. An item to help his class win the tournament? Now that it can do. Thinking strategically, Chris asks for something that can be used for the longest possible time, and the monkey's eyes begin to glow. A brilliant flash of light engulfs him, and a sense of dread washes over Chris. This feels like more than just a simple item. He braces himself. Every time a system character helps him, it always comes with some kind of twisted catch. But then, his eyes jolt open as a thought clicks into place. The monkey said it forgot this place, but waited here for him specifically. This whole encounter was planned. He whirls around, demanding to know if this thing knows Professor Eugene. The monkey's light fades as it casually remarks that a character named Eugene doesn't appear in the novel. Chris's heart plummets. What? That's impossible. Before he can process it, a blinding flash of light and a roar of sound transport him. He's suddenly in an arena, his students cheering wildly, thanking him for leading them to victory. A system notification chimes in his ear. Quest completed. He's received one lucky chance. The notifications keep popping up, and the horrible truth dawns on him. The monkey didn't give him an item, it just made them win. He knew the system would mess with him again, and this blatant manipulation is giving him goosebumps. Michael Foxon approaches with a bright smile, presenting him with the gleaming championship trophy. But something catches Chris's eye, the brilliant red mana stone embedded in the gold. Fine, he'll take it. He hoists the trophy high, accepting the hollow victory as the crowd goes wild. He gruffly tells his students not to get cocky, but Angelina tearfully promises they'll keep working hard. The victory feels hollow, especially when he realizes he has absolutely no memory of the past week. The thought sends a chill down his spine. The system didn't just give him a win, it stole his time. He's had enough, turning to leave as Michael and the others call out for him to stay and celebrate. But Chris just keeps walking. There's no time to savor a victory he didn't even earn. As if on cue, a new quest window appears. Take the students to defeat a boss monster in 7 days, or die. The system's instructions are vague, but he knows this is his chance to find the real Angelina, who's likely trapped by that boss. With the quest his top priority, his mind shifts to the next problem he has to deal with. That snake, Eugene. The guy wasn't even a character in the original story. Could he possibly be another transmigrator? Chris clenches his fist, shaking the thought away. He can't afford to lose focus now. He recalls what the system told him. The real Angelina was kidnapped by the so-called Snow Queen, a pretty name for a horrifying, mana-sucking monster. But he pushes the thought aside to focus on the immediate task. Soon, their carriage cuts through the desolate, snowy landscape towards the boss's domain. Riding in a duke's carriage is a new one for him, but he can see the frozen castle looming ever closer. He'd ordered multiple carriages to accommodate all the students, but somehow he still ended up stuck with him. Ryan, the loudmouth with the eye patch, is practically bouncing off the walls, screaming that his emperor's eye is tingling. Chris can't help but sigh, remembering how the kid begged relentlessly to join the boss fight after his tournament loss. Still, the kid has talent, and with the Eye of Flame in his possession, Chris is confident they can enter the dungeon. Andante, Angelina's younger sister, leans in, her voice filled with quiet concern, asking if the plan will be enough. He knows this mission weighs heaviest on her. As long as no one does anything stupid, he thinks, it should all work out. And of course, Michael Foxon is trying to comfort the very person who wants to kill him, assuring Angelina that everything will be fine. If only he knew her true identity, Chris muses, while Ryan loudly praises the guy's romantic moves. Finally, the castle comes into full view, and Chris is reminded that the Snow Queen isn't some damsel, but a true monster. With the carriages left behind, their party makes the final approach, through the biting wind and snow. They've arrived at the Kingdom of Frost. This was the dungeon where the novel's original protagonist had to fight both the Snow Queen and the Demon King's army. Chris smirks to himself. Thankfully, their little field trip only has to deal with one of those threats. Has already drilled the students on attack patterns, so even if it's tough, they should have a massive advantage. Trusting his students, Chris raises the Eye of Flame, and the Snow Queen's invitation to her realm appears before them. But the first thing to greet him is a colossal ice butterfly, a creature that was never in the original story. Chris steels himself. It's terrifying, but they have to attack before it moves. He orders everyone to prepare for battle. But the only response is the howling wind. He turns, a sense of dread creeping in. Class X? He finds them all collapsed, lost in their own personal hells. Angelina weeps for her mother while Michael is trapped in his own guilt. A wave of dark energy crashes over him, and he finally understands. This isn't a normal monster, it's a psychic attack. For some reason, it doesn't work on him, but that's cold comfort. He can't fight this thing alone. He needs a magic user. Then, an idea sparks. He needs someone who is immune to a monster's psychic assault. He rushes over to the unconscious Dolce, apologizing as he quickly searches her uniform. His fingers find it a small, golden artifact tucked away. He's got it. As he pulls out the item, a ghostly figure appears behind him, her voice echoing in the snow. A confident smirk plays on his lips. It worked. There you are, Gabbana. He cuts right to the chase, asking the ghostly twin if she specializes in electric magic. He glances back at the others, explaining his logic. He needs to wake up the one who can take a solid hit. With a snap of his fingers, he gives the command to jolt someone awake. But his chosen target isn't the obvious hero, it's the unassuming healer, Belle. He knows a fundamental rule of this world. The more affectionate and kind a person seems, the more cautious you should be. Gabbana unleashes a crackle of lightning, shocking Belle back to consciousness with a pained yelp. The plan works perfectly. Belle sits up, dazed and confused, her fluffy ears and tail suddenly popping into view. Chris calmly tells her to hide them, noting that others are strong due to their magic, but she's different. She gasps, flustered, realizing her true form has been exposed. Because healers in this world belong to a werewolf clan, a race bred for pure brutality, even if they now despise it. He explains that their hidden savagery is precisely why they're the perfect ultimate weapon for a dire situation like this. Belle nervously agrees to do her best, while Chris silently resolves to never unleash her full power unless absolutely necessary. His attention is suddenly caught by a faint buzzing, a magical insect hovering near a large, crystalline cocoon. Inside, a familiar hand clenches. It's the Ice Princess, Angelina, trapped within the spell's core. He realizes with a shock that this must be the real Angelina, held captive by the illusion monster. The horrible truth clicks into place. The insect was just waiting, conserving its energy before it started draining her dry. He spins around to check on Belle, who reports that she's almost done waking everyone but the last one is resisting. And that last student is, of course, the story's true protagonist, Michael Foxon, thrashing in his sleep. Michael is trapped in a far deeper nightmare, ensnared by the thorny vines of his own traumatic past. Chris isn't surprised. The illusion feeds on darkness, and Michael has the most tragic history of them all. Chris knows letting Michael go berserk would be a disaster, but his unique skills are their only way out. He grabs Belle, ordering her to prepare a mind link spell. He's decided to dive into the nightmare himself. She's horrified, warning him that a single mistake could trap his soul in there forever. But Chris can't back down now, reminding her that as their professor, he is responsible for them. He stands firm, declaring that a leader must always take the greatest risk. To calm her, he says if things get dangerous, she can just cut the connection and pull him out. The weight of that trust steels her resolve as she grits her teeth. With newfound determination, Belle promises she'll manage it and bring him back safely. A satisfied smirk crosses Chris's face. She finally understands what needs to be done. He tells her to hurry before the others die, then wonders if he should lower the difficulty on Michael's nightmare just a bit. With a flash, Chris dives into Michael's psyche, greeted by warnings of a hostile, unauthorized world. He arrives in a bleak landscape, remarking that it feels like some kind of unfinished game. He quickly pieces it together. If this world is built on trauma, then this must be the village where Michael grew up. Chris recalls the novel's tragic backstory, a demon king father murdering a human mother, causing the boy to snap. He spots a familiar elm tree from the book's flashbacks and heads toward the house where it all happened. From inside, he hears the desperate cries of a child screaming for his mother. Peeking through the door, he sees a young Michael shaking the lifeless body of his mom, begging her to wake up. The boy's pleas for help echo through the room, and Chris knows this situation is far worse than he imagined. Young Michael screams that a monster did this, his eyes wide with terror and grief. Seizing the moment, Chris steps into the light, ready to be the hero the boy always wanted but never had. Still holding his mother's lifeless form, the young boy looks up in shock, asking who this stranger is. Chris just scoffs, asking if he's so far gone that he can't even recognize his own professor. As a shadowy, monstrous form begins to coalesce nearby, Michael can only stare in horror. He grabs Chris frantically, screaming at him to get away before it's too late. The boy pleads with him, explaining that this monster is the one who killed his mother and it'll kill him too. But a confident smirk spreads across Chris's face. He isn't going anywhere. He calmly reminds Michael that he was the one who asked for help, and tells him to just watch carefully. Chris puts it all together. This world is governed by Michael's subconscious. And if Michael has always seen his professor as the strongest, then in this place, he's practically invincible. A blast of power erupts from Chris, forcing the boy to instinctively shield his mother's body from the impact. Chris leans in, chiding the boy for not paying attention like he was told. As the shadow demon lunges, Chris moves in a blur to stand between it and Michael. He effortlessly blocks the monster's world-breaking punch with just a single finger. The boy can only stare in disbelief. That was the fist that destroyed his home. But then it clicks. The professor was always someone who broke the rules of the world. Chris glances back, mocking Michael for wasting time being scared like a loser. He turns to the snarling beast, unimpressed by its pathetic display of aggression. He tells Michael he doesn't know what this thing is, and frankly, he doesn't care. But there is one thing he knows for sure, as his hand suddenly grips the demon's arm. With a powerful heave, he swings the massive shadow creature through the air. The beast crashes into the wall as Chris shields his student from the impact. He coldly tells Michael this is no place for him, and orders him to get a grip. The words sting. He's just embarrassing himself by reliving this old trauma. As the shadow demon dissipates, Michael realizes his professor is right. He's stronger now. He can't be trapped in these childhood memories. He needs to learn and get better. With his resolve returning, his consciousness gives way, and he slumps forward. Waking up, he clings to Chris, despairing over his own weakness against a psychic attack. Is he even worth all this effort when he can't even control his own power? Michael mumbles that Chris must be a kind person, but his professor just scoffs at the idea. And for his ridiculous bout of self-pity, he gets a firm bonk on the head. Chris cuts through his whining with a simple, solid fact. He is one of her students. The words strike a deep chord within Michael, touching him in a way no empty platitude ever could. He grits his teeth, a powerful realization finally taking root. Yes, as long as he holds the title of student, she will accept and guide him. With his mind set right, she declares the lesson over, and their mental sanctuary dissolves. They crash back into the snowy battlefield, where Belle is screaming their names amidst the chaos. The psychic exertion hits Chris all at once, and she stumbles with a pained groan. Belle rushes over immediately, frantic with worry for her professor and classmate. But Chris just brushes it off, her sharp eyes already on Michael. His training starts now. All traces of self-pity are gone, replaced by a beaming and re-energized determination. While the others are occupied, Andante unleashes a powerful torrent of water. Dulce is right there with her, launching a combined attack against an unseen foe. But their enemy, a razor-winged insectoid, deflects their magic with a deafening boom. The force of the impact sends Andante flying, slamming her into the cold ground. She grits her teeth, frustrated that her ice magic is useless, but determined to buy time for Angelina. As she struggles, a pair of boots steps into her field of view, casting a shadow over her. Michael has arrived, apologizing for his tardiness as flames erupt from his hands. He's a new man, vowing that his past will no longer hold him back. With a roar of fire, he engulfs the monster, ready to be a student his professor can be proud of. From a distance, Chris watches the brilliant explosion, a silent observer to his first real step forward. He muses that perhaps he's just too good at this roleplay as a quest completion screen pops up, rewarding him with Professor's grace. With the immediate danger handled, the students are loaded into carriages for the long trip back. Michael and Ryan, completely drained from their ordeal, are fast asleep. Chris scoffs at them, especially Michael, who's snoring away despite doing absolutely nothing. He'd already ensured the sheriff's sisters were safe, feeding Angelina a mana stone before sending them home. Now, with a moment to himself, he taps the system screen, curious about this so-called grace. The system materializes his reward, which flutters down into his hand. He stares blankly at what he received, a cheap sheet of 4-leaf clover stickers. Is this a joke? He almost crumples it in disgust before noticing there are instructions on the back. Reading them, a new thought sparks. These might be far more useful than he ever imagined. But his moment of contemplation is shattered by a sudden, jarring clatter from outside the room. The noise violently wakes Michael and Ryan, sending them tumbling into each other in a daze. As the boys recover, Chris listens intently to a low growl that definitely sounds like a monster. Michael scrambles up, asking if they're under attack, while Ryan mumbles about the dark horde being jealous of his power. Chris can't help but chuckle, completely ignoring Ryan's delusions. This kid needs to learn how to stay cool. But Michael is frantic, looking to his professor for guidance should they run or fight. It dawns on Chris after that boss fight. Michael's faith in him has absolutely skyrocketed. He shouldn't be so blindly trusting. But Chris has a hunch about their visitor and decides to take a gamble. He gives a simple command, for both of them to keep their eyes shut until he says otherwise. As they comply, a rapid whooshing sound slices through the air, signaling Chris has sprung into action. A system chime confirms his command, as a buff called Professor's Grace activates on the two boys. Chris lets out a quiet smirk. The activation condition is ridiculous, but it works. The system, however, fires back with pure sarcasm, mocking his cowardly tactics and forcing Chris to curse its awful personality. A new voice cuts through the air, taunting him for cleverly avoiding eye contact with her. The boys finally open their eyes, not to a monster, but to the cold, hard bars of a cage. Their captor, a blindfolded woman on a terrifying red dragon, greets Chris like an old acquaintance. This confirms his worst fears. Ignoring her taunts, he demands to know what happened to the other carriage. She just snickers, revealing her pets are playing with them, absolutely thrilled that all her targets are gathered. A cold dread washes over Chris. This isn't just an ambush, it's a full-blown battle. Meanwhile, as the sun sets, a rustle in the trees signals the other fight is about to begin. The woman on her crimson throne reassures them, almost mockingly, that she isn't here to just slaughter them. But Chris already knows the score. The dragons are just background noise. The real danger is the woman herself. Her curse is simple but deadly. Meet her gaze, and your magic is sealed away completely. He glances at his two students, a grim thought forming. This will be one hell of a training exercise. He tells them to close their eyes and feel the flow of mana, to sense the battle instead of seeing it. But their captor has other plans, calling this a test for her own young lord, and warning Chris not to interfere. With a single stomp, she unleashes a binding curse, pink energy erupting from the ground. The chains immediately snake around Chris, constricting him as his students cry out in panic. Michael demands to know what she's done, but the woman just shrugs it off, a casual experiment with a new toy. She then warns Chris not to struggle. The curse was designed for the powerful, and it only gets stronger the more he fights back. While his students plead for him to save himself, Michael tells his professor to just watch what he's about to do. But Chris isn't worried in the slightest. In fact, he's barely holding back a grin, realizing how lucky he is. These chains feel like jelly, but he decides to play along, eager to see how his students handle this. This is the perfect chance to test those special stickers he gave them, as Ryan squares up for a fight. Their captor, however, has her own plans, calling the boys her pets who will help awaken her master's power. In a flash, she summons a massive red dragon, leaping onto its back and declaring it's time for a hunt. Michael groans in frustration. He's running on empty after just clearing a dungeon. Suddenly, the clover sticker on his uniform begins to glow, and a strange energy flows into him. It's not just recharging his magic, it feels like his power has completely doubled, as blue flames erupt from his hand. Warning Ryan to get back, he unleashes a furious blast of blue fire directly at the roaring beast. And it's not just Michael. Ryan is cackling as the same energy surges through him, feeling his power spiral out of control. Their captor is stunned, unable to process how they're fighting with such limitless mana right after a dungeon crawl. Her eyes slowly turn, a dreadful suspicion dawning as she looks back at her prisoner. Because Chris Doughton is no longer playing the victim. He's smirking, blood dripping from his lip. A wave of shock hits her. She realizes he must have done something, a gambit she never could have predicted. But instead of rage, she's filled with a twisted admiration. This is the true Dame Chris, a fearless powerhouse. Chris, meanwhile, feels the link. He knows this power is from Michael and silently vows not to waste a drop. But beneath that confident smirk, a desperate plea echoes in his mind. Hez in agony, screaming internally for them to stop, because the professor's grace is draining his S-rank mana at a fatal rate. His plan was simple: offer them unlimited refills. But in practice, it feels like two giant mosquitoes are sucking him completely dry. The hooded woman leans in, mocking Chris for how pale he looks, telling him not to overexert himself. Michael isn't having any of it, unleashing a blast of magic and roaring at her to stay away from his professor. With a casual flick of her wrist, she dismisses the attack, telling the young lord to let the adults talk. Chris just glares back in defiance, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a single word. His silence only seems to delight her more. She finds his stubborn pride absolutely charming. She even comments on how difficult it must be to endure Michael's curse, noting it's been ages since she saw him bleed. Chris is sweating bullets from the mana drain, but she just assumes he's in pain from casting some complex spell. She gets uncomfortably close, admiring his supposed perseverance while he's just thinking she's a complete creep. But then, a cold realization washes over Chris. What are the odds that his random impersonation would be so accurate it could fool someone who knew the real Dame Chris? As he grapples with this, Michael's power explodes once more. The mysterious woman swoops in behind him, and for a split second, Chris's facade drops that actually startled him. Just then, Michael and Ryan burst onto the scene, yelling that they've handled the monsters and demanding to know what happened. Michael rushes to his side, panicking at the sight of the blood and chains, telling Chris he can finally open his eyes. But Chris just mutters to forget it, grabbing the glowing restraints himself. With a flex of raw power, he shatters the chains into dust, leaving Michael stunned and the blindfolded woman watching from afar. He turns to her with a cold glare, telling her to never bother him again, thinking how her delusions made his act easy. Suddenly, the woman flinches, not from his words, but from a searing pain shooting through her. Vile, purple energy erupts from her body as the curse she cast begins to rebound. She grits her teeth, a twisted smile forming as she marvels at how Chris could have endured such agonizing power so calmly. Chris looks back, a grim satisfaction on his face as he realizes the plan worked. Of course, the Demon King's curse would punish its caster. The woman laughs manically, embracing the curse's backlash as a twisted way to share his pain. Chris has had enough of this circus, turning to Michael and Ryan to announce they're leaving. Michael yells a final threat, making it clear he's only backing off for his professor's sake. A few days pass, bringing a sense of calm back to the grand halls of the academy. But a new student's arrival stirs the pot, a handsome young man with white hair turning every head. From the doorway of a classroom, Chris watches his students, anticipating their reaction. Dulce suddenly leans into a flustered Michael, her playful surprise catching him completely off guard. The newcomer enters, greeting them with a familiar, yet different smirk. It's Angelina, completely transformed. Michael is utterly baffled, as Dulce confirms she knew, leaving him the only one in the dark about this. Chris simply reads his book, recalling he did mention it, and even he has to admit Angelina cleans up well as a man. It all made sense now. After the dungeon, the Duke lifted the growth-stunting spell on Angelina. The Ice Princess was gone, replaced by Andante, and Chris had to admit, seeing it was far more impactful than just reading about it. Dolce, however, was focused on the immediate problem, asking Chris how he'd handle the commotion his handsome new friend was causing. And right on cue, a crowd of smitten girls were plastered to the window. A mess Chris realized was fueled by Angelina telling everyone they were related. Andante was already overwhelmed by the attention, and Chris pieced it together this was Angelina's scheme to shift the spotlight entirely onto her brother. But then Michael stepped in, not with a taunt, but with genuine pride, praising Andante for his growth and character. The tender moment is shattered by the class bell, which acts as a starting gun for a stampede of fangirls. While Andante is swarmed and begging for calm, Chris sees his perfect opportunity to slip out unnoticed. He escapes the chaotic classroom, finding a quiet spot outside among the trees. Leaning back, he can still hear the shrieks, musing that Andante is probably running for his life from those intense academy girls. But his peace is soon shattered by a panting Andante, who's followed him here hoping to escape the mob. The boy realizes this must be Chris's secret spot, chosen precisely because students are too afraid of him to follow. Chris just comments on the quiet, noting how things always seem to be calm when Andante is present. Andante brushes it off, confident that the girls will give up once they realize they have no chance. Chris muses that as an illegitimate son of the Duke, Andante is the most accessible connection to the powerful sheriff family. With a bitter laugh, Andante admits his father couldn't care less about him, but then he bows deeply, revealing he made sure his father knew that Chris saved Angelina, thanking him with all his heart. Chris simply hums, taking in the display of gratitude without much of a reaction. He then points out something interesting. Andante didn't even use stealth magic while being chased. As Andante fumbles for an answer, Chris understands this isn't about ability. He's choosing not to hide himself anymore. With a sly grin, Chris tells Andante to enjoy his newfound popularity all he wants. Andante is taken aback, a faint blush dusting his cheeks. But he quickly recovers, a confident little smirk replacing his surprise. He asks if he can visit Chris sometimes, only to be bluntly told to get lost. But that fragile peace was shattered as an incident broke out just before the first vacation. A scream rips through the hallway as two students stumble upon a grisly scene. Chris Doughton stands over a fallen body, his blade dripping with blood. His mind is reeling. He always thought his sword was for monsters, not for a human. The students cry out in horror, realizing their professor just killed someone they knew. But the story began just moments before, on a quiet day when Chris simply forgot his book. He was only going back for an illustrated kid's magic book he'd been reading out of boredom. The door to his office quietly swings open. He breathes a sigh of relief, thankful that no one is around this late. But his desk is a mess. The phantom box has completely overflowed with letters. He picks one up, sighing that he'd already asked the girls to back off a bit. A strange dust wafts from the paper, triggering a sudden, violent sneeze. He grumbles to himself, wondering how a fantasy world could have so much dust. With the letters tidied up, he decides it's time to get out of there. He walks down the now empty corridor of the academy building. It's just another boring day. He lets out a yawn, wishing a quest would finally come his way. He opens the door to his room, ready for a well-deserved break, when a sudden jolt stops him dead in his tracks. His own reflection stares back at him from the glass, unmoving, and he feels a cold dread creep in. Nearby, Andante and Leo can only stare in disbelief. There are two Professor Doughtons. The real Chris faces his smug-looking double, his mind racing. He knows he's the real one, so that means. He pulls up his map and sees it instantly. A nameless red dot, just like the lizard monster. The pieces click into place. This is a monster taking human form, a creature known as a doppelganger. These things are nasty. Some just mimic appearances, while the worst devour their victims' memories and souls. He needs to warn the students, but a dark amusement takes over. This thing thinks it can be him? What a joke. With pure contempt, he scoffs at the monster trying to imitate him, and the creature actually flinches. The doppelganger tries to steal Chris's line, but our professor is just over it. So, it's a monster. Meanwhile, the students are just casually discussing the situation, wondering why any monster would copy their professor. Chris seethes internally. He can't believe these kids are just buying it. He has to take control and fast. With a heavy stride, he walks forward, a new plan forming to deal with these good-for-nothings. The monster sidles up with a smug grin, but Chris glares back, utterly disappointed they can't tell a human from a beast. He faces his students Michael, Andante, and the others and declares their final test for the semester: find the real him. Two identical, unsettling smiles face the class as he announces that anyone who fails will not be returning. He quickly tells Belle and Leo to secure the doors, thinking he can't just use magic to prove it. They have to earn this. But from his seat, Michael Foxon is already simmering with rage, muttering about how dare this thing impersonate his professor. Dark energy explodes from his hands as he promises to kill the imposter, making Chris wonder he doesn't mean me, right? And so, the class discussion to determine the real professor begins. One group argues passionately that the Chris who was here first must be the real one, but the other side is just as certain, insisting the original was the monster and the second arrival is their true professor. Even Andante feels a strange awkwardness from the first Chris, unable to shake his suspicion. After all, the second one's total disinterest in them feels disappointingly familiar. As the students devolve into a shouting match, Dolce watches the chaos with a smirk. She steps in, calmly suggesting that instead of arguing, they should just ask them directly. With a devilish smile, she proposes a little Q&A session with questions only the real Chris could answer. She even notes that she's sure Michael, in particular, has some especially fun questions he'd like to ask. Taking the bait, a student immediately raises his hand to ask Professor A what he truly thinks of his students. Professor A, the real Chris, considers the question with a cold, unreadable expression. He bluntly states there's no reason to dislike them, they just exist, a fact not worth his feelings. Internally, however, he's reeling, realizing the dust he inhaled yesterday was actually mimic spores. These parasitic spores split in two. One drains the host's mana while the other grows into a perfect copy. And the worst part? If he attacks them separately, they'll just regenerate, forcing him to break character. But the students completely misread his coldness, thinking he's just pretending not to care. The question is then posed to Professor B. The doppelganger sighs, dismissing the question as not even worth the breath to answer it. Michael seems to accept this, a thoughtful look on his face as he prepares his real test. He then asks the copy if he has plans for the break, proposing they go somewhere together. The doppelganger replies that he's still thinking, an answer that sends a jolt of suspicion through the real Chris. The copy admits it's always been lost, a confession that stops Chris cold. This isn't just a simple mimic anymore. It's speaking his true feelings, the deep-seated doubts of his original self, not the character he plays. And hearing his own secret insecurities spoken by another person is just painfully embarrassing. But then the doppelganger says something that confuses him, wishing for someone to be there with it. Chris's mind flashes back to his past life. He's never relied on anyone, so who could it be talking about? Even in his previous world, he always handled things on his own. He starts to wonder if this is just a fluke, but a strange feeling, similar to when he first met the monkey, tells him otherwise. As the copy wishes for guidance, the quiet moment is shattered by a loud crash from the doorway. The door splinters inward, revealing Eugene, who casually apologizes for giving it a slight push. He greets Chris with a bright smile before his eyes darken, asking who the other person in the room is. Eugene takes in the scene, the real Chris, and an identical copy sitting right beside him. A smirk plays on his lips. This timing is just too perfect, almost like a warning not to listen. He calmly announces that class is dismissed for the day. Then, his gaze hardens as he points out their little training session with a fake Miss Chris. The doppelganger's composure shatters, its eyes wide with panic. In a flash, the imposter bolts right past Chris, who can only cry out in surprise. He instantly realizes it's running because it feels threatened, and he knows he must go after it. With his monkey keychain equipped, Chris's agility gets a much-needed boost as he launches into a sprint. Hes hot on the doppelganger's heels as it desperately tries to flee down the hallway, but its escape is cut short as a figure skids to a halt, blocking the path ahead. And it's none other than Chris Doughton himself, smirking back with a sinister glee, marveling at the mana he's already gathered. The doppelganger scoffs at the real Chris, sneering that he might look down on it now. But with a confident grin, it promises that its current weakness is only temporary. It then reveals its ace, boasting that it has seen inside Chris's mind. It knows things he doesn't even remember. Chris isn't buying it. He realizes the creature is just stalling, trying to buy time for its spores to fuse. Fine by him. He draws a glowing blade, knowing he just needs to aim for the heart to stop any regeneration. As its face begins to distort, the doppelganger mockingly pities Chris for everything he's forgotten. But it's too late for mind games. A flurry of precise, silver slashes cuts through the air. The attack connects perfectly, tearing through the imposter's chest as it lets out a pained shriek. It stumbles back against a door with a heavy thud, catching the attention of Dolce and Belle on the other side. A system window chimes, rewarding Chris with a mysterious, short-haired doll for completing the quest. But in the hall, students are screaming in terror, certain that Professor Doughton just committed murder. As the doppelganger's body dissolves into dust, Chris feels a familiar dread. This is the kind of exposure he fears most. He decides to use the confusion to slip away, his thoughts turning dark. He hasn't killed anyone, Not yet anyway. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ruined doorway, two other faculty members have arrived to see the mess. The green-haired Professor Eugene just laughs, admitting he got a little carried away when he sensed the monster. He then casually pivots, teasing his colleague about a rumor that he'd asked Miss Chris out on a date. His friend immediately panics, sputtering that he just celebrated his 15th wedding anniversary. Eugene grins, reminding the flustered man that he was the one who recommended the restaurant. It was just a joke. But their lighthearted teasing ends on a serious note. Miss Chris is an enigma that no one at the academy truly understands. Eugene leans in, a smirk playing on his lips, as he asks if his friend has some secret history with Professor Chris. A subtle clench of his jaw betrays a hidden thought, even as he maintains his playful facade. He just smiles serenely, dismissing the idea entirely, though his expression suggests he knows far more than he's letting on. The next day, the fallout from the doppelganger incident begins to take a strange turn. Dolce can't shake her confusion. Shed thought Belle was just joking about Professor Chris wanting to see her. She finds the professor waiting for her, her quiet presence filling the grand hallway. Once they're seated, Chris explains she's already reported the monster attack to the principal, but then she reaches across the table, presenting Dolce with something small. Dolce stares, baffled, at the little handmade doll being offered to her. She snatches it, her voice tight with confusion, demanding to know why on earth Chris is giving her this. Chris looks away, casually telling her to make sure she registers properly next semester. The comment hangs in the air until a ghostly figure appears beside Dolce. It's her twin sister, Gabbana. It all clicks into place as Chris explains that she used the doppelganger's mana stone to give the spirit a vessel. This is necromancy, a forgotten magic, and Dolce's mind reels, wondering how this professor could possibly know of it. She thinks back on her own desperate rituals, all of which failed because her sister's soul was just too strong. A chilling thought surfaces: did Chris stall the doppelganger on purpose, just to harvest enough mana for this? Gabbana's spirit gently rests a hand on her sister, whispering that she won't have to be alone anymore. Dolce remembers the crushing loneliness, how she could never tell her friends the full truth about her sister. Tears stream down her face as she clutches the doll, overwhelmed that someone finally sees Gabbana as a real person. But Chris cuts right through the sentiment, telling her to get rid of her arrogant thoughts and stop acting like she's the only one who's ever suffered. Then it dawns on Dolce the professor must have her own painful past, a reason to seek out such forbidden magic. A bitter smile crosses her lips as she finally admits it. She will never, ever be able to surpass this woman. She'll take the doll, but only to shut the professor up about her being arrogant. With that, Chris rises to leave, telling Dolce to figure out the rest before the next semester starts. Finally, finding a moment of peace, Dolce sits with her sister's spirit, clutching the doll and offering a quiet thank you. Chris, however, remains completely impassive as she walks away. But internally, she's groaning over giving up a one-time use item that could have been a perfect shield for herself. She sighs, justifying it as a long-term investment since Gabbana is in Class X, though she feels a little bad seeing Dolce get so emotional. Shaking it off, she wonders what she should do with her upcoming vacation. But her plans are cut short by a familiar voice, calling her a rascal, and she turns with a flash of annoyance. And there she is, a tiny girl in a frilly dress, scolding Chris for having the audacity to make the principal come to her. Chris immediately recalls the classic fantasy trope: the academy head is always a bearded old man or a deceptively young child. And this one, Lily Bedalua, is definitely the latter, still fuming that Chris never even bothered to pay her respects. But Chris knows better than to be fooled by the cute act. Underestimating this principal would be a fatal mistake. Lily's lecture is cut short by a familiar hand ruffling her hair, and she huffs, telling Chris to ignore her hopeless nephew. With the interruption over, Chris gets straight to the point, her voice flat as she asks what the principal wants. The question catches her completely off guard. Lily wants to know if she can dance. Chris is appalled by the very idea. The principal then reveals her true purpose, handing over an invitation to the Holy Emperor's birthday banquet. A system quest immediately pops up, and Chris groans internally. All this, just because she skipped a formal greeting. But then, a thought emerges. This isn't just a punishment, it's a golden opportunity to earn the Emperor's trust. The destination is the Grand Temple, a place of immense power and tight security within the Holy Kingdom. Lily explains this is a rare opportunity, as the Emperor plans on unveiling a remarkable, legendary relic. Suddenly, Leo pops out of nowhere, absolutely buzzing with excitement over seeing one of the 5 holy relics. Chris just sighs, having wondered where the principal's little pet was, and warns him not to trust the Emperor so blindly. She can't shake her suspicion. What does the old man really want? Lily just offers a chilling, knowing smirk. He simply wants to meet Michael and the professor who's earned his loyalty, she says. Just a friendly introduction. Then, with a flick of her wrist, She sends Leo sliding across the floor, ordering Chris to take her nephew along. This, she declares, is Chris's punishment. Hess just happy to go, but she realizes she's been saddled with a watchdog. Resigned to her fate, Chris just hopes there's a good reward waiting, as Lily promises she won't be disappointed. With their course set, a carriage begins its journey, clip-clopping through the forest toward the Holy Emperor's banquet. Inside the sweltering carriage, Chris lets out a heavy sigh, finally understanding why they needed a break. He laments that his best students for this weather, the Ice Princess and Dolce, have already gone home. Instead, he's stuck with this crew: Michael, a gagged and bound Ryan, and Belle, a bunch of hotheads. Belle and Ryan, however, are completely mesmerized by the view of the Divine Kingdom under its massive dome. As Michael quietly sits down, Chris glances over, immediately sensing a shift in the atmosphere. The kid doesn't look happy at all, and Chris knows exactly why. He remembers from the novel how the temple shut its doors on a young Michael right after his mother died. Looking out at the kingdom, Chris feels a pit in his stomach, regretting he stopped reading before the Emperor's dark side was revealed. With a loud screech, the ornate carriage finally grinds to a halt on the pristine stone path. Stepping out, the group takes in the breathtaking sight. They have finally arrived at the Divine Kingdom. To the others, this place is a utopia, a pristine world untouched by the grime of the outside. But as Belle gushes over the scenery, she can't help but notice Chris is practically radiating irritation. He scowls, finding the perfect, sterile whiteness of the city disgusting, a clear sign that outsiders like them will never blend in. Just then, a chipper voice cuts through the air as a young man in white robes approaches the group. He introduces himself with a dazzling smile as Beryl, a priest assigned to be their guide for the day. Beryl cheerfully explains that all citizens bear a divine mark, showing off a glowing cross on his hand. Since they lack this mark, they must be escorted at all times, and he leads them toward their lodgings. The building is an opulent palace, a breathtaking display of wealth and grandeur that leaves the students speechless. Inside, Beryl hands them a small bell, telling them to rest in their rooms and to ring only if they absolutely need assistance. Michael, Ryan, and Belle are completely blown away by the luxury, while Chris looks like he just smelled something awful. As the other students rush off to explore, Chris scoffs at their childish excitement. But even he can't completely suppress his own curiosity about this place. A quick glance reveals a level of absurd luxury that puts royal palaces to shame. Still, he reminds himself to keep up the act of the unimpressed outsider. He's absolutely certain the Holy Emperor is watching him through every gilded fixture in the room. And he's not wrong. The Emperor, a young girl named Lily, scries upon her city, seeing it as the perfect prison. Chris cracks a devious smile, deciding he has a special present to make their first meeting memorable. Miles away, Lily watches the feeds from the palace, her interest piqued by this strange professor. A knowing smirk spreads across her face as she witnesses his response to her constant surveillance. He gives the hidden camera a piece of his mind, thinking that this emperor is every bit as interesting as he'd heard. Lily is actually impressed, thinking it's been ages since someone aware of her eyes showed such open contempt. But elsewhere, another powerful figure is watching. Beryl, the Pope, who recalls the Demon King's reign. She thinks back to a mysterious, veiled female officer who was a whirlwind of pure chaos on the battlefield. Beryl was truly saddened when that officer vanished, even though her absence led to the army's collapse. All this time, she had secretly hoped that Agent of Destruction would return to turn the world upside down. The rumors she heard, however, were of a declawed tiger, a wandering professor with no ambition left. But seeing that fire in Chris's eyes now, she feels a flicker of that old, dangerous hope returning. A slow, unsettling smirk spreads across her face. Reaching towards her scrying crystal, she issues a silent challenge for him to prove he isn't tamed. She desperately wants him to be the magnificent disaster she has been longing for. And from her own vantage point, little Lily Bedalua grins, thinking this banquet is already more exciting than ever. The next morning, a bright and cheerful atmosphere fills the room. A messenger from the Emperor arrives, all smiles, holding an ornate golden chest for none other than Professor Doughton. But Chris isn't fooled for a second, knowing this so-called gift is just the Emperor's petty response to being provoked. The messenger explains that he heard the professor lacked suitable attire for the banquet. With a heavy sigh and a feeling of dread, Chris slowly lifts the lid. Inside, nestled on fine cloth, is a stunningly beautiful dress and a pair of golden rings. Ryan can't help but crack a joke about seeing his professor in a dress, earning a quick smack from Leo. But just as Chris dismisses it, his system suddenly alerts him to a special item. His eyes widen in disbelief. It's a quasi-holy relic with incredible stats, making him wonder just how badly the Emperor wants to see him in a dress. He knows he should just take the relic, but his pride as a villain simply won't let him look too eager. The messenger, Beryl, just smirks, smugly asking if he's satisfied with the Emperor's gift. Without a word, Chris simply turns and drops the entire golden chest into the trash with a loud thud. A wave of killing intent washes over the priest, as Chris warns him never to treat him like a fool again. But just as the tension peaks, a calm voice calls out Beryl's name as a new figure steps into view. Even Leo pipes up from the side, agreeing that a dress like that would never suit his professor anyway. The newcomer, a senior priest named Robert, gently chides the now terrified Beryl for his informalities. He then turns to Chris with a warm smile, extending a hand to introduce himself for the first time. Chris is completely unfazed, coldly asking the man what he wants. Robert's smile never falters as he reveals a new, darker box, explaining he has a small favor to ask. Robert explains the upcoming banquet will be crowded with outsiders due to a holy relic exhibition. He needs Chris, an outsider himself, to discreetly find a suspicious individual among the guests. To help him blend in, Robert presents a stunning purple necklace, assuring him this one is perfectly normal. Chris's mind snaps, so the last gift was a trap. But with such a polite request, he has no choice but to agree. After a deep sigh of resignation, he reluctantly accepts the mission and the outfit. A short while later, he examines himself in a mirror, feeling awkward in the dark, elegant dress. He adjusts the black veil, only for a system window to reveal it's a disguise dress that boosts his fame. His only hope now is that his students don't see him like this and start rumors. But as he opens the door, he's greeted by the sight of Leo, Ryan, and Belle standing right there. The three of them are completely stunned, their jaws dropping at the sight of their professor. Breaking the awkward silence, Chris asks if the outfit really looks that strange. Michael, flustered, tries to find his words, stammering out his professor's title. Then, with a surprisingly sincere smile, he says the professor actually looks really nice. Chris just sighs, thinking they're forcing compliments out of pity, and decides to just get to work. He walks past the other two, Ryan and Belle, who are still frozen in place. They immediately start whispering, wondering if their professor was secretly a noblewoman this whole time. Belle, however, notices Michael is still blushing as he watches their professor walk away. A mischievous glint in her eye, she leans in and asks if he's so captivated he wants to ask for a dance. Michael snaps, about to shout about respecting their teacher before Ryan slaps a hand over his mouth. Composing himself, Michael mutters that it's fine. They're here for a mission and he can't be distracted. Belle smirks, realizing Michael isn't denying it as she keeps Ryan's mouth covered. Meanwhile, the team arrives at a lavish and brightly lit banquet hall. Chris, hidden beneath a dark veil, observes that the place is packed with nobles. He knows the main event is the unveiling of holy relics, the perfect time for a disaster. So, for now, his plan is just to lay low, confident no one would possibly recognize him. But then, a familiar voice calls out his name, and he immediately flinches. Chris turns in dread, already knowing who that voice belongs to. The scene flashes back to the day before, inside Andante's room with his sister Angelina. She tells him to stop sulking, noting he looks like he's just swallowed a lemon. Angelina wishes head gone with Chris, but Andante complains that he couldn't just ignore their father's summons. Angelina casually dismisses their father as someone who knows nothing but magic, but Andante thinks she's just talking about herself. He sighs, wondering if all geniuses are this difficult. Before she hands him a sealed envelope, he asks what it is, and she calmly reveals it's an invitation to the Holy Emperor's birthday banquet. Confused, he asks why she has it, and she smugly explains that she's famous now, with people eager to see her. Andante slumps forward, completely speechless at her overwhelming confidence. She then looks him in the eye, asking if he's still afraid of straying from the path laid out for him. He clenches his fist as she reminds him he's already done it once, so there's no reason to worry. Suddenly resolved, Andante springs to his feet, announcing he's borrowing one of her horses. A grin spreads across his face, his decision finally made. Hes not running from his father. There's just someone he absolutely has to see at that banquet. While mingling at the banquet, Chris spots a familiar face, her eyes widening in disbelief behind her veil. It's Andante Sheriff, looking surprisingly sharp. He can't believe she's here either. She's the first to speak, her tone sharp as she demands to know what he's doing at this event. Andante simply bows, explaining that his sister Angelina gave him an invitation to represent the Sheriff family. Chris tries to dismiss him, telling him to focus on his family's affairs since they have nothing to do with her. But as she turns away, he swallows his nerves, his resolve hardening. He quickly stops her, making it clear he didn't approach her just for a simple greeting. With a newfound confidence, he extends a hand, asking the mysterious lady for a dance. Chris is completely stunned, caught off guard by his sudden and daring request. And just then, a system quest pops up. Dance with someone to make Michael jealous, or suffer worsening luck. Internally, Chris is reeling. She can see Andante's ears are bright red, but this ridiculous quest is all she can think about. The word jealousy makes her pause, and her eyes instinctively drift across the hall. And there he is, Michael, staring right at them with an icy glare. So, that's the target. The system is trying to push a cheap, cliché love triangle, and she is not having it. Annoyed, she decides to reject the whole situation, swatting her hand to dismiss the quest window. But in her haste, she accidentally slaps Andante's outstretched hand instead. A bead of sweat drips down her face, though this mistake might just be the perfect excuse to get out of this. She decides to go all in, giving him a glare that could freeze fire, treating him like some disrespectful brat. Andante flinches back, completely caught off guard by her sudden hostility. He was just expecting a casual brush-off he could laugh away. But this feels dangerously real. Through her veil, she can feel his gaze, and for a moment, she thinks he's seen right through her. Andante, meanwhile, is absolutely mortified, stammering an apology for what he thinks was a huge misstep. But Chris just cuts him off, coldly informing him that she's currently working, not just standing around. The word working snaps him out of his lovesick daze, making him flinch. His eyes dart around the hall, and it finally clicks. Someone is monitoring this entire banquet. His hand clenches as he realizes her harsh rejection wasn't personal at all. Surveillance means danger, and danger means there's no time for idle flirting. She reminds him that they're both here for very different, and much more serious reasons. He understands now her hostility was a performance to keep him from getting entangled in her mission. A wave of relief washes over him. She rejected him, sure, but it was for his own protection. Andante is still reeling, recalling how he'd offered to help only to be dismissed as a snotty brat. Chris, meanwhile, feels she's handled him, but now a new worry surfaces. What was the penalty for refusing that quest? Her thoughts are cut short, as a priest barrels through the crowd, screaming that there's an emergency. The bombshell drops. The holy relic, the very centerpiece of this banquet, has been stolen. Panic erupts among the other clergy, who can't believe such a breach of security was even possible. But a calm, authoritative high priestess steps forward, ordering the doors sealed and revealing she was tipped off about the heist. She announces to the entire hall, including a wary Michael and his friends, that the thief is still among them. A dark smile plays on her lips as she warns everyone to cooperate, hinting that this is no ordinary relic. The crushing pressure of the situation makes Andante wonder, is this the dangerous work Chris was talking about? Chris herself feels the heavy lockdown atmosphere, realizing with a curse just how serious things have become. Amidst the chaos, Chris realizes this must be the bad luck she was warned about. She tries to calm down, telling herself that just because she feels something in her dress, it doesn't mean it's the holy relic. But the system notification is merciless, confirming she has the holy relic purity, and it wants to talk. A talking relic? Fine. With the guards about to start their search, she has no choice but to accept. The conversation starts, and the relic is furious, demanding to know which bastard shoved it into her pocket. Chris wants to know the same thing, but Purity is stunned. It's never been heard by anyone before unless they were a child of the Creator God. Suddenly, the relic issues a dire warning. It's dangerous for someone like her to be nearby, as a purification spell is about to be cast. To put it simply, Purity explains, She's going to die. Chris freezes, realizing She's become the dumbest thief in history, holding a time bomb. Her face goes deathly pale, and Andante rushes to her side, asking if she's okay. She can only tell him to stay back while she thinks. She desperately asks the relic for a solution, only to be told the horrifying truth. Purity's very purpose is to filter impurities, which means she is the target. Resigned to her fate, she sarcastically asks how much time she has to think of her last words. The relic generously grants her 10 minutes, enough time to divide her non-existent assets. Panic bubbles up. She's in a crowded room with nowhere to run, no way to just become invisible. But then, through the veil, her eyes glint with a sudden, insane idea. Her gaze falls upon her own status window. It's usually just for display, an untouchable interface. But what if she used a system item against a system notification? She draws a gotcha dagger. Andante calls out, stunned by her sudden movement. But Chris is already committed. It's all or nothing. With a desperate lunge, she drives the blade straight into the system window, demanding her choice. The digital construct cracks under the force, shattering like a pane of glass. A wild, triumphant smile spreads across her face. The crazy gamble actually worked. The system flickers and dies, the demand to choose a side dissolving into static. Her stats crackle and glitch out as the interface crumbles. A wild, ecstatic grin spreads across Chris's face with this. Her very existence is erased. The system screams in protest, detecting an error so severe her recognition value has dropped to 0. An emergency inspection begins, with no estimated time for recovery, and even she has to wonder if this was a good idea. The proof is right beside her, as Andante looks around in a daze, asking who he was just talking to. Yes, it worked perfectly. A little brute force goes a long way, it seems. Now, her first priority is to get this holy relic to the Emperor, though she's a little worried about side effects. Still, it feels like a waste to just leave now that the relic has pointed out the true culprit. She's far too curious to find out why they were so hell-bent on screwing her over in the first place. She listens as the crowd murmurs about the threat notice, suspecting an outsider. But Chris knows better. Only someone with a holy mark could have ever reached the relic. It has to be an insider, and with a soft tap of her heel, she decides it's time to return what was stolen. A sudden scream rips through the hall, and as guests turn in shock, Chris can't help but smile. All eyes land on Priest Beryl, who has somehow stumbled, sending the holy relic clattering across the floor. The High Priestess immediately descends upon him, her voice sharp as she demands to know what is going on. He sputters, trying to explain he gave it to someone, but he can't remember who, a perfect side effect of her system error. His confused panic is all the confession the High Priestess needs to hear. She gives the order without hesitation: take the criminal Beryl to solitary confinement. Addressing the stunned guests, she formally ends the banquet, completely unaware of the true culprit watching from the crowd. With one big hurdle cleared, Chris sees the notification: quest complete, and the ring of reflection is hers. But her relief is cut short when the High Priestess approaches Michael, asking for a private word. Chris's eyes flash red. She knows this game. The Holy Emperor is trying to snatch her student, and she won't allow it. Just then, her system fully recovers, granting her a new immunity to all item-based damage. Michael, caught off guard, begins to politely address the Holy Priestess, only to be interrupted by a cold voice declaring that her holiness has terrible taste. Chris steps right between them, and Michael can only stare in shock as she confronts the woman. The High Priestess simply smirks, feigning surprise that Chris was even here, as if she were completely insignificant. But Chris stands her ground, challenging her to go through her first, drawing a mocking comment about her teaching style. Seeing the stalemate, the High Priestess pivots, dismissing Michael and announcing she has business with Chris instead. And just like that, the tense confrontation shifts to a private meeting. The High Priestess opens with a hollow thank you to Chris for her recent assistance. She's referring, of course, to the Holy Relic theft case, but Chris's expression is anything but grateful. The priestess explains that after interrogating Beryl, he confessed it was all due to jealousy. She adds with a smirk that he couldn't recall a name, only that he was waiting for a special outsider. Chris isn't fooled for a second. She realizes the Holy Emperor must know about the system's true nature. So, she cuts to the chase, suggesting a proper reward would be a better way to show gratitude. The priestess tries to deflect, but Chris argues that solving a mess caused by the church's negligence is a separate service entirely. Trapped by her own logic, the High Priestess asks what she wants, playing right into Chris's hands. A sly, triumphant smile spreads across her face. She's been preparing for this very moment. With her plan set, Chris calmly states her demand. She wants the holy relic that was stolen. The High Priestess is taken aback, completely stunned by the sheer audacity of the request. A moment of silence passes before she can't hold it in any longer, and she erupts into a fit of genuine, unrestrained laughter. Wiping a tear from her eye, she admits that Chris truly defies her expectations every single time. Chris clarifies that she's fine with it being just a useless decoration without the priestess's touch. She stares her down with a knowing smirk, asking if she's sure that's what she wants. As Chris and her companions depart, the High Priestess watches them go, still reeling. She chuckles to herself, finding the entire exchange almost too funny to believe. To think she'd ask for the relic itself, especially for someone not driven by greed. What could her true motive be? Her smile fades as she realizes Chris' request wasn't for herself, but for her disciple. She had a little experiment in mind. See what happens when the holy relic, which filters impurities, is used on a boy with the Demon King's blood. But with Chris seeing right through her, that plan is now completely off the table. A shame, really. As Chris walks away, she muses that a mere relic wouldn't have been able to hide that bloodline forever anyway. With a sinister smirk, the High Priestess looks forward to seeing just how far Chris will go to protect that precious disciple of hers. Meanwhile, miles away, Chris feels a sudden itch in her ear, wondering if someone is talking trash about her. A system window pops up as the relic's voice chimes in, demanding to know why she brought it along without the Holy Emperor. It's just a talking orb now. Chris is just relieved they can communicate, explaining that she needed an intellectual partner, someone she's been lacking. She points out that since she's already seen through its concept, the relic might as well cooperate. The relic calls her a strange one for such a trivial reason, prompting a deadpan glare from Chris for the sudden insult. Chris decides that since the relic is no longer holy, it needs a new name, a suggestion the orb accepts, having forgotten its own name long ago. A silent agreement passes between them. It's probably for the best. She officially welcomes her new partner, the orb, and a system window confirms she's discovered a hidden character. The holy relic is officially downgraded to a rare item, now named Guseol. Guseol immediately complains about its terrible new name, but before Chris can retort, Lily calls out that their carriage has arrived. And soon, they're back within the grand, familiar walls of the academy. With vacation having started, the grounds are quiet, giving Chris a rare moment to just lie back and relax. She muses on how the other novel protagonists all left for the Holy Kingdom, leaving only her and Michael behind. Bored out of her mind, she wonders if she should pass the time by playing word games with her new, pest-like companion. But her quiet is suddenly broken by Michael, who appears with a bright smile, thinking it's a waste to spend the break just resting. He reminds her of a promise she made back during the doppelganger incident. With a charming smile, he formally asks if she'll go with him now. Chris's mind instantly races. This is a classic event, a place the protagonist would normally take a heroine. Ah, so the system is pushing them together. Michael's hopeful expression all but confirms it. Well, she was bored out of her mind anyway. A new main quest pops up, sending them to his village. So they set off together, walking through a dead, desolate forest. When they arrive, the sheer devastation is worse than Chris had even imagined. Michael stares at the ruins, his face heavy with guilt as he confronts his own past. A painful memory flashes back, a young, wailing Michael clutching his mother's body as his village burned to the ground. He apologizes for bringing her to such a grim place, confirming that this was once his home. Michael begins to reminisce, painting a picture of a perfect childhood with his loving mother. Chris listens, but she knows the painful truth behind his idealized memories. The reality was that his mother never truly loved him. She simply couldn't bring herself to abandon a child. He leads her onward, announcing they've arrived at the special place he wanted to show her. Before them lies a stunning field of flowers, a place he and his mother used to visit together. But Chris' internal alarm bells are screaming. She knows this from the novel, and it doesn't add up. According to the lore, this area should be so infested with monsters that nothing could possibly grow here. Realization dawns, and she immediately grabs Michael, a look of pure panic on her face. Her eyes then catch movement on a hill, a lone figure standing where no human should be. A wicked grin spreads across her face as she and the system come to the same conclusion. This is a trap. The trap is sprung, and a gruesome, decaying figure claws its way towards them, pleading to be saved. Michael's blood runs cold. He recognizes the face. It's his Uncle Brown, a man he knows is long dead. Chris immediately grabs him, ordering him to look away and block it out. It's all just an illusion. She has to yell to snap him out of his horrified trance, demanding he focus. Finally breaking free, Michael points towards the dense forest, saying he knows an escape route. They don't hesitate for a second, feet pounding the dirt as they flee into the trees. He pulls her along with surprising speed, so fast that Chris wonders where on earth he's leading them. But just as quickly as they started, Michael suddenly skids to a halt. He turns back to her, a hint of desperation in his eyes, and asks a very strange question. Can she swim? Chris is taken aback, but he quickly says it doesn't matter. It'll be fine, even if she can't. He turns to her from the edge of a massive cliff, insisting the currents are weak and she just needs to follow. Chris can only stare back, completely deadpan, her mind screaming that this guy is absolutely insane. But her hesitation is cut short as one of the grotesque zombie illusions lunges straight for her back. With a split-second decision, she figures drowning is a much better fate than getting torn to shreds. And without another thought, they both leap from the precipice, committing to the fall. She sinks into the cold depths with a faint, wry smile, thinking what an intense summer it's been before losing consciousness. A frantic system alert from her bead tries to snap her out of it, warning her that this whole situation feels wrong. Chris finally sputters back to life, finding herself not in the sea, but on the damp ground of a cave. Her memory pieces itself together. The jump, swimming after Michael, and then everything going black. Just then, a familiar voice cuts through her confusion, asking if Chris has finally woken up. Her eyes snap open. She knows that voice. Looking up, she sees not only Michael but also a blindfolded woman who greets her cheerfully, completely ignoring her own ragged state. Chris is baffled by the sight, her mind racing bandages, pitch-black pupils. Could it be magic exhaustion? Then she remembers. The original protagonist's eyes were artificial, powered by magic, but this woman seems far from her peak. Michael, looking like a mess himself, tries to reassure the woman that he'll handle things, earning an internal eye roll from Chris. She's quickly briefed on the situation. Michael brought her to this cave, but there were already 3 others inside. Apparently, They all got into a massive brawl for some unknown reason, beat each other half to death, and then fled. Chris immediately takes charge, telling them both to sit down. She can't let the protagonist run wild in this state. She lays down the law. They'll move at daybreak, and any more fighting is just a waste of energy. The blindfolded woman then offers her a handful of twigs to dry her clothes, a small gesture of calm in the chaos. Michael conjures a small flame, noting how handy fire magic is, and invites Chris to warm herself. He then drapes his own soaked jacket over her shoulders, a gesture of concern. Looking away, he seems embarrassed, trying to find the right words to say. But Chris, ever the pragmatist, cuts him off with a deadpan stare, asking if it's time to take off his clothes now. Michael immediately panics, sputtering that she's got it all wrong. He clarifies that his clothes are soaked and he's worried about getting sick, much to her internal relief. He then points out that she's just as drenched and asks if she's okay. The blindfolded woman, overhearing this, timidly offers a large cloth, suggesting Chris use it if she needs to undress. Chris shivers slightly, her fingers moving to the collar of her damp dress. But before she can, the blindfolded woman gently drapes a dry, warm cloak over her shoulders, a quiet act of kindness. Chris glances at the fresh, angry scars on her shoulder, musing that she'd wanted to hide them for a more dramatic reveal. She admits she doesn't even know how she got them, then tells Michael to quit staring and get some sleep. But he can't look away, his gaze fixed on her with quiet concern. The blindfolded woman, watching them both, suddenly speaks up. She explains that those who live by the sword, like Chris, are forever haunted and never truly sleep. Michael's head whips around, angrily demanding what a stranger like her could possibly know about his professor. She just smiles, saying Lord Chris is exactly as she remembers, strong, beautiful, and carrying the world on her shoulders. Her tone darkens, wondering if Chris's so-called lord caused those wounds, remarking that very few beings could even scratch her. Then, the truth comes out. She reveals they've been disappointed in Michael's progress, and that Chris was assigned to him to trigger his awakening. That's the last straw. Michael lunges, roaring that she will not insult his teacher, who no longer belongs to anyone but herself. But his attack is halted by her mocking voice, calling him a lost puppy who didn't even notice her arrival. Suddenly, a quiet voice from behind him asks if he was awake, and Michael freezes, realizing Chris heard everything. Before he can respond, a desperate cry for help echoes from deeper within the cave. A grotesque wooden hand flops into view, the pleas growing louder. Chris instantly recognizes the danger, but the blindfolded woman just looks amused by the development. She even seems impressed, noting she didn't expect Chris to recognize the scent of the devoured kin. Chris quickly deduces that some poor soul must have been attacked and fled into this cave to hide. Looking into the darkness, she realizes with dread that it's not just one, there are far too many of them. The three of them are now surrounded by the writhing, grasping limbs of these creatures. The blindfolded woman calmly explains their ability. They emit a magic that stiffens and paralyzes their targets. Knowing they hunt mana, Chris identifies herself as the primary target and calmly tells the others to fall back. The creature's paralyzing magic strikes true, but she doesn't even flinch, willingly taking the full force of the attack. In that split second, she slips a small golden ring onto her finger. It's a reflective sigil. The system confirms the attack is negated, and the item enters a critical state. She channels that negated power into a devastating punch, obliterating the monstrous limb with a concussive blast. But as it shatters, a pained, childlike voice echoes from the remains, crying out for its mother. Michael and the blindfolded woman can only stare, stunned, as Chris stands firm, having effortlessly protected them. He's completely amazed by her power, but she simply notes they just need to wait, as these things will crumble at dawn. And right on cue, the first rays of morning light pierce the gloom of the cave. Michael looks back to see the creatures turning to dust on the shore, the strange and terrifying night finally over. As the last of the creatures crumbles, Michael notices something glinting in the dust. His heart sinks a pocket watch. Scissors. These are the belongings of the villagers. Chris confirms his worst fears, explaining this is the same phenomenon from the flower field. When objects are exposed to mana leaking from dead bodies, they become ghoul-type monsters. The horrifying truth crashes down on Michael. He'd been fighting the twisted remains of his own people. The blindfolded woman pipes up, telling him not to feel regret. Monsters just imitate the dead. Seeing that he's physically recovered, Chris cuts through the sentimentality with a sharp command. He tells Michael to get up and burn the remains, or they'll just move again at sunset. As Michael agrees, the original quest description flashes through his mind. Soothe the souls. And it all clicks. These things appeared because the villagers never received a proper funeral. Still weak, Michael looks up and agrees to handle the final rites for his people. The blindfolded woman cheerfully announces she has to leave to continue her experiments, even with her wounds. Chris can only sigh, realizing the Demon King executive got hurt by blowing herself up with her own research. With a wave, she leaps into the air, transforming into a massive red dragon and flying away. Now alone, Michael and Chris stand somberly before the ruins of the village, ready for their grim work. He reaches out, and with a surge of mana, ignites the wooden remains, finally setting the souls to rest. But as the fire burns, a system window suddenly flashes into existence right in front of Chris. A quest notification appears. The prerequisite for Michael Foxon's awakening has been triggered, and it requires a team. Chris is completely thrown. Hez involved in this? And it's happening far earlier than it did in the original novel. A small, calculating smile forms on his lips. He can't just rely on the original story anymore. Without a second thought, Chris eagerly accepts the quest, fired up and ready to go. But his excitement crashes and burns when he sees the catch. It can only be done during the academic term. As the village burns behind them, his orb even teases him for clenching his fists in frustration. And so, the rest of the summer vacation passed quietly, with both him and Michael returning to the academy changed. Chris spent his time in brutal self-training, pushing his body to its absolute limits. The quest window updated constantly. Michael had been grinding non-stop, clearing the first two conditions on his own. As the second semester begins, Chris watches other students from the shadows, biding his time. For him, it's not about classes. It's all just part of the plan now. Michael's hard work has paid off, clearing nearly half the awakening quest requirements already. But a grim look crosses Chris's face as he stares at the next objective. Obtain a Demon King's horn. But Chris already has a plan. A memory from the novel resurfacing. A dungeon break in Michael Foxon's room. He knows the clear condition is pure brute force, and he can already picture his classmates suffering through it. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted by Dulce shouting for everyone's attention, announcing a new student. She cheerily introduces a small doll as her twin sister, Gabbana, whose spirit is just borrowing it until she gets a new body. Watching from the branches, a smirk plays on Chris's lips, wondering if his little spell worked. The doll suddenly appears right in Leo's face, its voice echoing Chris's thoughts. Leo stares in stunned silence as the doll repeats the question. Did it work? He finally lets out a shriek, screaming that the doll talked, while Michael just looks on, completely unfazed. Michael calmly tells the panicking Leo to prepare for camping, mentioning he's already taken care of the local monsters. Chris, meanwhile, is utterly bewildered. He told them to self-study, not go on a full-blown field trip. Down below, the possessed doll Gabbana complains about the view, demanding to sit on her sister Dulce's head. Chris is just dumbfounded by their flawless teamwork. Are they planning to live out here? The system confirms their choice. He lets out a long sigh. Fine, maybe this crazy survival training will actually help the kids grow. Leaving them to it, Chris strides back through the academy halls, his mind already on his next task for the new semester. He still needs to have a serious conversation with Ryan about what happened in the dungeon. But there's also the lingering anomaly of a boy named Eugene, a character who never appeared in Hero Rampage. No matter how hard he looks, he can never seem to find the guy, and it's starting to feel like Hez the one being clingy. Then, as if summoned by his thoughts, he spots that unmistakable green hair standing in a crowd. A sudden chill runs down his spine. Why are all those people gathered right in front of his room? He confronts Eugene, who calmly informs him that getting inside his own dorm probably isn't an option right now. Chris demands an explanation, his mind racing. Did that little dragon girl empty his room again? But peering past Eugene, his eyes widen in shock. Where his door once stood is now a swirling, chaotic vortex of dark energy. The system calmly identifies it as a dungeon entrance, and Chris's blood runs cold. That dungeon belongs to Michael Foxon. The orb reveals the system's logic, displaying a new notification. A cohabitation event to increase affection with Michael? Chris can't believe what he's reading. So the system just deleted his entire room to force the protagonist's awakening quest on him. Eugene helpfully offers his room, but Chris grits his teeth and refuses, claiming he has a place to stay. He repeats the lie, but inside, Hez starting to panic. It seems Hez about to become homeless. And so, Professor Chris finds himself setting up a lonely tent at the student training camp. He has to admit, the student base camp isn't half bad for a temporary home. It's safe, quiet, and close to the academy, a perfect place to lie low. But relaxing can wait. With a new resolve, he decides it's time to clear that dungeon. Besides, he needed to go out at night anyway for a very specific, time-sensitive item. Thankfully, he came prepared, activating a special map he'd upgraded himself. Using a quest reward, the item combination recipe, he'd created a tool to pinpoint recovery items. While he's out here, he might as well gather some other useful herbs. Spotting what looks like a weird cucumber, he reaches down to grab it, only for the system to scream a warning. He freezes, realizing his mistake. That's a mandragora, and its silent, area of effect shriek is legendary. With a sigh of relief, he backs away. Pulling that thing would have summoned an entire wolf pack for a party he wasn't invited to. But even without touching the mandragora, Chris feels a sudden, hostile presence. From the bushes, a pair of glowing purple eyes glare out, belonging to a massive white wolf. The system orb absolutely panics, screaming about how they're supposed to deal with wolves again. It frantically suggests singing it a song or maybe just crying to gain its pity. But Chris isn't worried. He calmly observes the creature's familiar, cream-colored fur. He then focuses on its eyes, recognizing that distinct pinkish glow. A small smile plays on his lips as he realizes he knows this particular wolf. He calls out her name into the night, Belfresia. Stepping forward, he coolly asks what she's doing wandering around outside at this hour. The fearsome beast immediately deflates, letting out a pitiful whimper like a scolded puppy. Chris lets out a weary sigh, thinking this coat seems to attract nothing but trouble. He drapes his own cloak over the massive wolf, telling her to change back so they can talk. In a shimmer of light, the wolf's form recedes, and a bare, scratched foot steps onto the grass. A panicked Belle, now human, stammers an apology and admits this isn't her first time sneaking out. His gaze falls upon the sacks filled with medicinal herbs, and her secret starts to unravel. He realizes she's been selling them to get by, and Belle's face flushes with shame. Chris knows the academy's tuition is astronomical, and a student like her would get no financial support. It all clicks. She's been using her powerful wolf form to easily harvest herbs and pay her own way. She tries to explain, her voice cracking as tears suddenly well up, catching him completely off guard. Then she drops a bombshell. Her family is looking for her, promising not to kill her if she returns now. Chris's mind races, connecting the dots. Werewolves were ancient allies of the Demon King. If they're making moves now, it means the resurrection of his army is happening far sooner than he thought. Belle's desperate voice cuts through his thoughts, pleading that she has nowhere else to go but the academy. This place is her only shield, and if she gets expelled, her family will surely find her. A wave of guilt washes over Chris. He can't just stand by and watch this happen. He tells her that to avoid trouble, she'll now move only under his direct supervision. He then presents her with an official outing permit, offering to buy all the herbs she can gather. Belle is utterly stunned, asking what he's planning as he simply tells her to start digging. Her shock melts into blushing disbelief, a quiet, stammered thank you escaping her lips. The gratitude then bursts forth, and she thanks him over and over, overwhelmed by his sudden kindness. The system orb mocks him, asking if he can even afford it, but Chris confirms he has plenty from the principal's reward. The night passes, and the bright morning sun shines down on their camp. Chris's eyes slowly open as he awakens from a long, comfortable sleep. He feels something soft beneath him. Confused, he definitely remembers falling asleep on the hard ground. The source of his comfort is none other than Belle, who let him use her massive wolf form as a bed. But as he sits up, he's greeted by an even more shocking sight, a mountain of herbs. He's stunned. She must have dug up every single herb in the entire area overnight. With a satisfied look, he hoists a heavy sack onto his shoulder. This is more than enough for his own quest. He glances back, figuring he can afford to be a little late for his morning class. As he walks away, the system teases him for being considerate, but Chris just brushes it off as a whim. He arrives to find a crowd gathered at his dungeon room, with faculty nervously suggesting they should assess the situation first. But some students are far too eager, practically vibrating with excitement to explore for their graduation projects. Chris can only shake his head. They were just itching to sneak in. At that moment, someone spots two figures moving inside the portal, and just like that, two students are violently ejected, screaming their lungs out in pure, unadulterated terror. The faculty is stunned, rushing to the traumatized pair, demanding to know when they even went in. As one student swears never to go back, Chris gives Eugene a smug look, noting this is what happens when you're unprepared. Eugene finally notices him, offering a quick update that the principal is handling the room issue. But his train of thought derails as he takes in Chris's gear, a massive sack of herbs and a frying pan. Chris dismisses his curiosity, telling him not to worry about what he does in his own room. Eugene's playful demeanor vanishes, his voice dropping as he asks if what Chris is about to do is truly necessary. Chris notes Eugene's odd tone, the same one he used before, hinting that he knows more than he's letting on. Eugene tries to play it cool, deflecting that it's none of Chris's business. But his facade cracks, and he admits with a sigh that there are just some things only Chris can do. That cryptic talk again, Chris decides to cut through it and offer a little advice before he goes. He turns, asking Eugene what is so worried about, telling him to just say what's on his mind. Eugene's expression softens, gently chiding Chris not to do everything himself, just for a bit of praise. Just then, a commotion starts as the other students realize their teacher has just walked into the dungeon. A flicker of worry crosses Eugene's face as he watches the portal swallow his friend whole. With a final, decisive step, Chris leaves the familiar world of the academy behind. He finds himself standing alone in a vast, dark labyrinth, the true challenge finally beginning. The system orb states the obvious. They've walked right into a labyrinth. An overhead view reveals the true scale of the dungeon, a maddening maze filled with traps. The orb panics, but Chris calmly explains that since he's alone, the difficulty is at its lowest, though the final boss is another story. He pulls out a notebook, revealing his true purpose for coming in ahead of the students. A sly grin spreads across his face as the orb realizes his insane plan, to map the entire structure beforehand. He confirms it, flashing back to the kind of terror this place would inflict on the unprepared. After all, trying to clear a labyrinth like this without a map isn't brave, it's just a slow, exhausting suicide. That's why he brought so many herbs and, to the orb's surprise, a full set of cooking tools. The system can only call him crazy, a title Chris accepts as the highest compliment. With his frying pan held high, he sets off, ready to show this dungeon what a proper Korean meal can do. 5 grueling hours later, Chris emerges, having mapped the dungeon fueled by nothing but medicinal herbs. The very next day, he returns to the labyrinth's entrance, looking completely refreshed. This time, however, has brought the Academy's star students along for the ride. He knows the dungeon's difficulty will spike with more people, but he's not worried these kids are all overpowered. He turns to the group, laying down the one and only rule. Follow him, and they'll conquer this maze. With a confident smirk, he leads the charge, the students hyped and ready to go. The party ventures into the dungeon's depths, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. But it doesn't take long for the first monster to appear, a fully armored skeleton warrior. It lets out a ghastly roar and lunges forward, bringing its massive sword down on the group. Before Chris can even react, a hand bursts into flames, ready to turn the undead knight to ash. And that hand belongs to none other than Michael Foxon, who blasts the skeleton with a pillar of flame. The students are already a well-oiled machine, calling out new threats and coordinating their attacks. But Chris is lost in thought, realizing this dungeon is completely different from the one he cleared yesterday. Still, he plays it cool, strutting ahead as if he has it all figured out, much to his students' confusion. His confidence is tested when they arrive at a massive intersection with a dozen different paths. While the others hesitate, Chris calmly points down one of the hallways, not missing a beat. Leo and Michael can only watch in utter amazement, wondering how their teacher is so sure of the way. Michael finally has to ask how he navigates this impossible maze without a single wrong turn. Chris's answer is simple: instinct, a chilling sense that tells him exactly which path leads to death. He tells them to simply walk where their ominous instincts lead, and his students can only follow. Internally, however, the system mocks his cringy explanation, and Chris tells the nagging voice to shut up. A low rumble echoes through the stone corridor as they press on, a dark presence looming just ahead. With a decisive step, Chris suddenly halts the group. He announces their arrival before a massive, winged gargoyle statue perched high above them. Leo thinks the statue looks familiar, quickly realizing it's a perfect copy of the one at the academy gate, as its eyes flare with red light. The stone creature stirs to life, its voice booming as it welcomes the travelers to the forgotten labyrinth. It tells them a tale of an ancient sage who entrusted it with a cursed object, one that tragically corrupted its friend. Now, that friend has become a monster at the labyrinth's heart, and the gargoyle begs them to save him. Leo eagerly accepts the noble quest, but Chris is unimpressed by the cliché knightly drama. The gargoyle smiles, thanking them before revealing their entry depends on one simple question. It asks where its friend might be, leaving the rest of the students completely stumped. Chris, however, immediately realizes this is a trick. The answer is far too simple. The gargoyle had just told them the location, so answering that way would surely spring a trap. So instead, he shouts out his own answer. The friend is everywhere. Leo frantically asks what he means as the gargoyle's expression begins to contort. With a deafening roar, the guardian cries out for its friend, as the very ground begins to crack apart. But Chris just smirks, telling his team to prepare themselves for the real boss battle. A voice echoes in the darkness, welcoming them not to a labyrinth, but to the labyrinth itself. It's the stomach of the forgotten bull, and the students recoil in sheer disgust and horror. Chris confirms their worst fears. The dungeon's true name is the bull's stomach. So that's it, the constant stamina drain is them literally being digested alive. And the only reason such a thing is possible is because this beast once swallowed the Demon King's horn. Eugene and Angelina can only stare, feeling the cursed, ominous energy pouring off the artifact. Chris, however, is completely unfazed, telling Leo its power is nothing to worry about. But just as he plans to slip away, a frantic voice screams in his mind to dodge immediately. Before he can even process the warning, a powerful, unseen force slams into him. Chris's mind reels. The very fabric of reality before him has been split in two. He knows this power, the ability to tear through space and time, a domain reserved for gods. And from that impossible rift, a figure begins to emerge. It's him, the one person who absolutely should not be here. Chris's eyes narrow, his worst fears confirmed in an instant. Towering over him with an aura of pure dread, stands the Demon King. Leo and Angelina are frozen, completely clueless as to who this terrifying boy is. But Chris has no time for explanations. His hand darts towards the cursed artifact. He seizes the Demon King's horn, a desperate gamble that leaves his friends aghast. A grim satisfaction crosses Chris's face. The conditions for awakening are nearly met. The system screams at him to run, but he ignores the warning, his resolve hardening. Leo and Angelina cry out in confusion, asking what on earth he's doing. He grits his teeth, there's no other choice. Gusel will have to monitor things from here. With the dungeon collapsing, the Demon King will soon be free to invade the academy. That absolutely cannot be allowed to happen, not while the monster is still weakened. So with a powerful shove, he hurls Leo towards an unseen destination. Leo's eyes widen in terror as he's sent flying, screaming out for his teacher. But his desperate cries are cut short as he vanishes into the rift. And as for Chris, he finds himself under a sickly purple sky, the air thick with dread. His eyes blink open, adjusting to the oppressive, alien atmosphere. His heart sinks with a terrible realization, this has to be the demon realm. How could this be? The demon lord appearing in some backwater dungeon? This completely derails the original story. A familiar, smug voice cuts through his confusion, and he looks up to see Michael standing over him. The demon lord mocks him, amused that Chris would cling to him and leap through a dimensional rift. He suggests they go inside, chiding Chris for sitting on the bare ground like a child. With a grand gesture, Michael invites him into the towering, nightmarish castle behind them. Chris stares, his mind reeling. Hez actually being asked to walk into the demon lord's stronghold. He clenches his fist, realizing he must be on his highest alert. This place is full of people who knew the real Chris Doughton. He knows one wrong move in this place means a fate far worse than a simple death. But Michael just watches him with that same infuriating, all-knowing smirk. Chris steals his resolve. Hez not just some stray, has a homeroom teacher with kids to get back to. The demon lord welcomes him home, a word Chris finds bitterly ironic for what feels like a cage. He's led into the castle and shown to what is supposedly his old room. For a fleeting moment, he thinks Michael might be more hospitable than expected, and decides to rest. But that fantasy shatters. He knows he can never let his guard down around this monster. Looking around, he notices how empty the room is. It barely seems lived in at all. Just as he wonders about his connection to the original Chris, a familiar blue screen flashes to life. The system connection is restored, flooding his vision with frantic messages begging for a reply. This is insane. The sheer volume of messages is overwhelming. Feeling a pit in his stomach, Chris decides he has to reply, starting with the most recent one. His blood runs cold as he reads the text. His disciples have lost it and are coming to find him. Before he can process that, another window pops up confirming Michael's awakening is now complete. He clutches his head in a silent scream. Those lovable idiots. What are they thinking coming after him? Back at the academy, the students are in a heated debate, refusing to just sit by and do nothing. Nika tries to be the voice of reason, warning Andante that this isn't as simple as sneaking over a wall. Dolce steps in to calm them down, reminding them that their professor's safety is what matters most. But Belle voices the group's deepest fear, wondering what horrors their teacher might be facing. Dulce's expression hardens. She knows their professor is in danger, but there's a much bigger problem at play. She knows all too well about Michael, who's been eerily silent since his appearance changed. We flash back to that moment in the dungeon, to his desperate scream as their professor was lost. He could only stare at the aftermath, the horrifying truth of their situation crashing down on him. Dolce and the other students were just as stunned, calling out their professor's name into the silence. But then a sudden, suffocating pressure began to radiate through the dungeon air. What is this? Their legs wouldn't move, pinned down by an overwhelming force. The pressure was coming from Michael, a dark, blood-red aura now pouring from his body. As a demonic horn tore through his skin, the grim reality finally settled in his mind. The professor sacrificed himself for them. He stood fully transformed, his grief replaced by cold resolve as Belle and the others watched in awe and fear. All that remains is a memento, a silent promise to the man who gave his life for them. He recalls his master's words, a promise that he would never be abandoned. And if that's true, then a disciple must naturally follow his master, wherever he may go. Michael drops to his knees, his mind set on a single, unwavering goal. Just then, Eugene bursts in, frantically asking if Professor Chris finished the raid safely. But he stops dead in his tracks, his eyes locking onto Michael's demonic form. He can only stammer, demanding to know where their professor has gone. Michael calmly states that he's going to go and get him. With chilling certainty, he promises that he knows where Chris is and he will bring him back. A strange, knowing look crosses Eugene's face, a flicker of bitter understanding. He thinks to himself, a silent lament to Chris, that the world always seems to interfere. Eugene sighs, turning to the real authority in the room, telling her there's someone she needs to speak to. And there she is, Lily Bedalua, radiating an aura far beyond her years, demanding everyone follow her out for a full report. Back in Chris's room, Dolce recounts her meeting with the principal, the conclusion being utterly grim. The academy won't send anyone. She knows Michael, though, asking if he's just going to smash his way out, even as his other friends plead for him to wait. But Michael is already getting the official explanation whispered in his ear. The higher-up suspect Chris defected to the Demon Lord. The principal's logic is cold and political. Sending a rescue team is a risk, a potential trap they're unwilling to take. Michael can only smirk at the absurdity, thinking they wouldn't be spouting such nonsense if they'd actually seen what happened. He remembers it vividly, Chris grabbing the Demon Lord and plunging into the void, a clear act of sacrifice. Belle approaches him, her voice trembling as she asks if he's really leaving to face the one who took their professor. With a gentle touch to his collar, he reassures her, his mind already made up and his path set. His eyes gleam with resolve. Hell, show them all the true results of Chris Doughton's teachings. Meanwhile, in the heart of the demonic realm, an unwilling guest arrives. Chris can't believe this. He thought they were just grabbing a quick bite, the two of them. Now, he's seated at the head of a grand table, right beside the Demon Lord himself. One of the lieutenants snarls at him, clearly unhappy with the seating arrangement. The Demon Lord smiles, remarking how long it's been since they last shared a meal together. But Chris has no memory of this, wondering if the original Chris was raised in the Demon Lord's army. The Demon Lord explains that his power is still returning, allowing him to travel only to where parts of his body remain. He went to retrieve his lost horn and just so happened to run into Chris there. What a coincidence. Back in the present, Michael's mind connects the dots, a grim understanding dawning in his eyes. The Demon Lord begins his interrogation, casually asking Chris how he's been living all this time. Chris immediately recognizes this for what it is. The classic, "How have you been?" talk, a test of his loyalty. Leaning in with a smug grin, Michael seems to enjoy the tension, watching Chris squirm. Internally, he finds the whole situation pathetic, thinking Chris is just as hopeless as he's always been. But Chris fires back, telling him to stop asking questions he already knows the answers to. Michael's smile only widens, clearly amused by this familiar defiance. He remarks that Chris' sharp tongue hasn't changed in the slightest. Waving off his own concerns, he decides to show Chris something pleasant instead. He then stands and walks away, telling Chris to finish his meal and come out when he's ready. Left alone, Chris feels a sudden chill. He has a very bad feeling about what the Demon Lord considers pleasant. Meanwhile, a lone carriage rumbles through the desolate, magically charged twilight. Inside, a student named Gusel laments his fate, clutching a soulstone necklace. He reflects that in all his long life, he's never suffered quite like this. His companion beside him can't help but see it as a tragic, romantic scene. But another girl is panicking, asking if this is really okay, even with a teacher covering for them. Ryan just grins, assuring her that with Andante, the principal's nephew, they have all the backup they need. A different student tries to rally the group, telling them to save their energy for what's ahead. But Gusel is already at his limit, grimly asking if they've finally arrived. Their destination looms ahead, a sinister estate known only as the Land of Death. Ryan's playful demeanor vanishes as he orders everyone to get ready and ensure the carriage does not stop. Gusel clenches his fist, his mind focused on a single, unwavering goal. No matter the cost, he has to reach his teacher. And at that very destination, dark feathers drift down from an ominous, purple sky. High above, Chris Doughton watches on, sensing his students are rushing in recklessly. He'd actually been planning to slip away before the kids even got here. But then his gaze fell upon the courtyard below, swarming with an unbelievable sight. An entire army, ready for war. This is way ahead of the original plot. Michael Foxon smirks behind him, asking if he's surprised by how much has changed. He taunts Chris, mentioning that a very capable new recruit is the reason for all this progress. Chris follows his gaze, and his eyes widen in pure disbelief at who he sees in the crowd. Standing before him is a hulking, muscular figure, wreathed in dark energy. The man smirks, greeting him with a chilling familiarity, calling him Master. Chris's mind goes completely blank. Who on earth is this guy? The man seems to enjoy his confusion, noting that even the great master would find this hard to believe. He reveals himself as Aaron, the disciple Chris supposedly pushed into the demon realm himself. Chris scrambles for an answer. He remembers writing a backstory about a lost disciple. But was it this brute? Playing along, Chris coolly admits he thought Aaron had died when the pit's seal was broken. Aaron grinds his teeth, savoring the fact that his master has walked right into his grasp. A flicker of realization crosses Chris's face. He knows exactly what over-the-top line is coming next. And, just as predicted, Aaron challenges him to a duel to settle things once and for all until one of them dies. Chris just sighs internally. He knew this trope was coming, and has no interest in indulging Aaron's childish tantrum. But the Demon Lord Michael smoothly steps in, telling Chris to hear the boy out. His lieutenants even suggest holding the duel in the arena to make an example out of them. Chris tries to wave it off, muttering that this musclehead isn't even worth his time, but he knows he's cornered. Michael feigns disappointment at how cold Chris is to his disciple, and with a heavy heart, Chris finally relents. A wicked grin spreads across Michael's face. He wasn't letting Chris leave until he accepted anyway. And here's the kicker. If Chris refuses, he could always send Aaron to visit his students back at the academy. That's it. Threatening his students? A dark fury finally boils over inside Chris. He slowly turns, his gaze locking onto the man who forced his hand. Aaron flashes a predatory smile, asking if his master has finally found the courage to face him. Chris grips his former student's jaw, warning him that this will be his final lesson. But just then, a system quest appears, locking him in. Win the duel and escape, or the Demon Lord doesn't spare losers. The scene cuts to a massive demonic coliseum, roaring with thousands of spectators. Seated on his throne, the Demon Lord Michael Foxon looks down with a smug grin. He announces to the crowd that they're about to witness a special duel, one they can all learn from. Down in the arena, Chris clenches his jaw, the sheer scale of this spectacle hitting him hard. For a fleeting moment, he wonders if he should just run. But his opponent is already waiting. Aaron begins to speak, his voice filled with years of resentment for his old master. He reveals that every day in that pit, he obsessed over why he was abandoned, and how he could be forgiven. But now, with blood streaming from his eye, he's reached a new understanding. Chris just got tired of him. Aaron's voice cracks with rage, demanding to know why he was thrown away after respecting his master so much. But while his former student has his breakdown, Chris is already making his move, subtly gripping a small keychain. A system window flashes to life as he equips the enhanced item, his agility skyrocketing in an instant. He can't help but feel a little smug. That reward enhancer he got really came in handy. Of course, this power-up isn't free. He's only got 10 minutes before the item shatters completely. Seeing no reaction, Aaron grits his teeth, his patience finally snapping. He's done talking. Raw demonic energy begins to swirl around his fists, ready to be unleashed. As shadowy hands erupt from the ground, he screams for Chris to give him an answer, any answer, to end this. But Chris simply sidesteps the attack, moving faster than Aaron can even track. He looks down at his disciple with cold eyes, thinking he can't answer because Aaron hasn't improved one bit. Internally, Chris notes that at least the annoying monkey noise is gone, but a new penalty has taken its place. The item now forces all his sentences to end in a question mark, a perfect tool to make his disciple think for himself. We're shown a glimpse of their past, how Aaron was despised for his kindness in the Demon Lord's army. Chris, on the other hand, was an untouchable prodigy, leading the two loners to stick together. Through Aaron, she experienced affection for the first time, but in return, all he learned from her was how to be ruthless. So, the old Chris was trying to take responsibility for the disciple she single-handedly ruined, and with just a few well-placed questions, Aaron is already on the floor, his will completely shattered. The demonic audience, however, is getting bored, mocking Aaron for not even landing a single hit. Chris leans in close, forcing him to hear their jeers, asking if this is truly the revenge he wanted. She calmly guides him, asking him to think about the seal. Sure, the caster's death is one way to break it, but through gritted teeth, Aaron realizes the obvious alternative. The caster can simply release it. The implication dawns on him. She had planned to return for him from the very beginning. He still tries to fight it, screaming that her abandonment forced him to suffer endlessly in the demon realm. But Chris sees right through him, asking a simple question. He's tired of killing now, isn't he? The old desire for massacre just isn't there anymore, and his eyes betray that truth. She inwardly notes that whether this was the original Chris's plan or not, it seems to have had the right effect. All of Aaron's rage deflates, replaced by choked, defeated groans. Then, his composure shatters completely as he launches himself at her, bawling like a child. He cries that she's a tactless idiot, just as a system window announces the item enhancing him has expired. And just like that, his power-up shatters, leaving Chris internally screaming, "Oh crap, she's about to get crushed by this giant baby." But before she can shove him off, a bandaged hand forcefully grabs her shoulder. A new figure appears, her face completely obscured by wrappings, and she is furious at being left out of the loop. Her subordinates try to calm her down, explaining that Lady Maria was supposed to be resting, so they held back the news. She then complains to her lord, Michael, who just casually dismisses her, saying their meeting with Chris was pure chance. This Maria then turns on Chris, telling her not to bother with such a greenhorn, but Chris just wants her to let go. Utterly exhausted by the whole ordeal, she decides there's no point continuing and announces she's leaving. Michael seems amused, asking if she's really quitting now, but Chris dryly states she doesn't beat up corpses. After a brief moment of consideration, the Demon Lord actually agrees. Any more fighting would be pointless. He orders Maria to escort Chris out, and as the command is given, our hero breathes a silent sigh of relief. She's finally free. Just as she's about to leave, a message from Gusail flashes, warning her about an advance so strong even the Demon Lord might notice. As Chris and Maria turn the corner, their path is blocked by a towering, muscular figure. The man looks directly at Chris, his expression one of pure reverence as he calls her Master. From his throne, Michael sighs, bored that the fight ended so quickly, and asks if he can go now. He muses to his underlings that he quite enjoys duels, viewing this entire war as a contest between him and God. But the best part, he continues, is the process of the loser being utterly trampled. Suddenly, massive black spikes erupt from the floor, skewering the disciple right where he stands. Michael looks down upon the impaled man, casually wondering if Hez being too affectionate, or if this man just wasn't worth his power. Aaron chokes out his lord's name, while Michael mockingly admits that he's at least the best at taking a beating. The Demon Lord then covers his nose, disgusted by the stench of a loser, and declares he doesn't like it at all. He coldly informs Aaron that his treatment will begin in a week, telling him to just endure it. As Michael walks away, his mind drifts to the real problem. The original protagonist. He knows that man is the reason Chris began to change, the source of this defiance. Just a tiny crack, he thinks, is enough to eventually bring down an entire dam. And that is a future he absolutely will not permit. Chris possesses a rare talent, a power that even those of his own bloodline can't match. So the path is simple. Chris will bring him victory. Otherwise, there will be no more need for leniency. His eyes flare with a chilling finality. The scene cuts violently to a dark, ominous mountain under a stormy sky. A monstrous hound lunges forward, and in a flash, a white-haired student is brutally torn to shreds. And while some students meet a grim end, Michael stands unfazed amidst the carnage he's wrought. He grips his sword, thinking he chose this path to be like his teacher, but he's got a long way to go. Nearby, Leo collapses, completely spent, while Ryan lies face down with his soul leaving his body. But Belle is already cheering them on, announcing the gatekeeper is down, and the Demon Lord's castle is next. The others can only stare at Michael. While they're a mess, he doesn't have a scratch on him after doing the work of 10 men. Leo watches him, a deep unease settling in, wondering if this is even the same Michael he once knew. This person who grew so powerful, so suddenly he feels like a complete stranger now. But Michael isn't paying them any mind, his attention already drifting elsewhere. His eyes narrow as he senses a new presence approaching, and from the shadows, the clatter of hooves announces their next opponent has arrived. A dazzling smile breaks across Gusail's face, pure relief washing over him. Elsewhere, another of Chris's students panics, desperately searching for his teacher. And there he is, Chris Doughton, having just dismounted as Gusail stares up, both stunned and relieved by his arrival. But his gaze drifts to the creature Chris was riding, a horse made of bone. Chris looks down at his students, his expression anything but pleased. Gusail starts to say how glad he is that his teacher is safe, but he's cut off immediately. A cold voice asks exactly what they think they're doing here, acting without his orders. He scolds all of them, Michael, Dolce, and Gusail, for having the audacity to enter the land of death on their own. Taking command, he orders his followers to load the magic stones from the Cerberus. He couldn't ride a monster in front of the kids, so he quietly turns his skeletal steed into a cute keychain. He clutches the keychain, a small token from the blindfolded woman who couldn't spare her horse. Chris glances at his students, already forming a plan. The intel on the Demon Lord's army should be enough to get these brats off the hook. He had to admit, he was impressed. He wondered what kind of guts they had, but to think Gusail and the others actually defeated the gatekeeper. It's a bit of a shame he missed their awakening, but he smirks. There will be plenty more chances to see them grow. Gusail is just relieved his teacher is safe, admitting he was ready to destroy the entire Demon Lord's castle. Chris notes internally, the kid has gotten a lot angrier. Soon enough, they arrive back at a familiar, sun-drenched estate. But their welcome is a fiery one, as a young girl stares in utter disbelief. They actually brought Chris back? She immediately rounds on Chris, accusing him of sending them, but he scoffs. He tried to stop them, but they insisted. With glowing purple eyes, she cuts through the pointless chatter, her voice ringing with authority. It's time to talk. She's taking charge now. The kids will stay by her side, and Chris is coming with her. Behind ornate doors, a much more serious conversation is about to take place. Lily stares in disbelief as Chris delivers the grim news. The Demon Lord's army is poised to be resurrected. She slumps in her chair, annoyed that things are moving faster than she expected, and agrees to report this to the pontiff. In the meantime, she gives Chris a direct order to manage his students, especially that pale-haired brat, Gusail. Chris's expression turns thoughtful, considering how the world will now view the boy. A flicker of suspicion crosses his mind. Just how much does the pontiff already know about this entire situation? He remembers the headmaster's logic. As the protagonist, Gusail needs a true friend to keep him from being warped by others. And luckily, there's a perfect candidate for the job, Leo, who's just feeling a little insecure after seeing his friend's recent power-up. Chris smirks internally, realizing he just needs to guide them along the path laid out by the original story. He can already see the pivotal moment when Gusail finally reveals his true identity to Leo as the son of the Demon Lord. He can see it now. Leo, understanding everything, will become the unwavering shield that keeps his friend from falling into darkness. But with their relationship set on the right path, Chris's attention snaps back to a more pressing issue. It was time, he decided with a grimace, to finally grab that squinty-eyed troublemaker by the collar. He sets off through the moonlit grounds of the academy, his mind racing. The Demon Lord's resurrection is approaching, and he knows a storm of major incidents is about to break loose. Before that, he needs to understand the nature of the biggest unknown variable in his story, Eugene. The guy never appeared in the original novel, yet he knows about the system, and that makes him dangerously unpredictable. As he walks, a sudden chime rings out and a familiar blue screen materializes before him. It announces the start of the quest's Chapter 3, where rewards will now depend on meeting certain conditions. Chris stops dead in his tracks, blindsided. A main quest? Starting now? And what exactly are these conditions? The quest requires them to find legendary weapons, but the conditions are insane. Michael Foxon must join, and no magic is allowed. Chris's eyes lock onto the final, chilling requirement. One of the participants must be designated as a sacrifice. And who should appear right on cue but Eugene, the squinty-eyed enigma he was just looking for? The student has a proposition, asking Chris to hear him out before they do anything else. With a strange seriousness, he promises to reveal everything, just as a 4-8-hour countdown timer materializes. The two stand in tense silence for a moment before Eugene turns to lead the way. Chris follows, his mind racing with questions as the boy leads him toward the old, abandoned dormitories. He listens to Eugene's cryptic ramblings about how ignorance is bliss, but Chris has no patience for it, cutting him off and demanding he get straight to the point. Eugene's attempt to look cool instantly deflates under the teacher's glare, and he sheepishly agrees to talk. But instead of talking, Eugene's hand slowly closes around the hilt of a dagger. With a chilling smile, he declares that he's here to send Chris off right away. Chris is completely stunned. He thought this squinty bastard was on his side. Before he can react, a heavy boot slams forward into his chest. Eugene warns him that this is a time to swallow his pride, or he'll lose his life. The blow sends him stumbling backward, completely overpowered by the sudden assault. As he tries to regain his footing, his mind races, desperately assessing what few items he has left. But as he glances back, his eyes catch on an odd detail that stops him cold. The door to the abandoned dormitory, the one he knows should be locked, is slightly open. And in that moment, a slow, knowing smirk spreads across his face. Aha. So this was all a setup. Chris demands to know if Eugene brought him here on purpose. Eugene's only answer is a slow, unnerving smile. He advances, explaining that the thing on the other side learns, so it won't be fooled twice. This time, Chris can't enter willingly. He has to be thrown in by force. Chris's mind reels. Is he talking about the system? He realizes his survival is now entirely up to him. With no more time for talk, Eugene grabs him by the cloak, his expression unreadable. He shoves Chris backward, declaring that all his questions will finally be answered in there. With a final, decisive push, he sends Chris hurtling toward the open doorway. As he watches him fall, Eugene offers one last piece of advice. May luck be with you. Chris can only scream internally, cursing this absolute fraud as he plummets into the unknown. His fall through the gateway triggers a memory of the moment his old life ended in a car accident. A system window had offered him a second chance, a single choice between death and life. He jolts awake with a gasp, the phantom pain of that moment echoing into the present. But as his vision clears, he's met with an impossible sight, a man who looks exactly like him. A cold dread washes over him. Who is this person staring down at him? The man calmly introduces himself as his guide, and his name is Chris Doughton. He continues, explaining that he is the original owner of the body our hero is currently inhabiting. The world shatters. Possession? He wasn't reborn. He was a parasite in someone else's life. A flash of memory, it was Eugene, or Squinty, who pushed him into this mess. He recognizes the room, it's the hospital where he first woke up in this world. And the real Chris is right here. The original Chris explains that the body is now loaded with absurd high-tier skills our hero never had. He then snaps our hero out of his daze, calling him by his true name, Sarah, and asking why he looks so lost. Without waiting for an answer, he brings up a system window, declaring it's time to start clearing quests. The first ever main quest appears. Simply reach the entrance of Vidalia Academy. Our hero quickly analyzes it, the difficulty is low, and more importantly, death is not a failure condition. The real Chris explains this is a world where he can finally become the strongest, and tells Sarah to find them a carriage. Soon enough, they arrive at the grand, all-too-familiar gates of the academy. Looking at the gargoyle statue, our hero sighs. It feels like he's starting all over again, and the repetition is getting annoying. But then, a realization hits him. He doesn't need to stick to his old persona anymore. He has power to spare. With a smirk, he adjusts his blindfold, deciding it's time to debut a new, more refined version of himself. And so, he puts on his best cheerful face, greeting the gargoyle with a sickeningly sweet smile, while the real Chris dies of cringe beside him. He figures being polite this time around will make things go a whole lot smoother for everyone involved. His mind drifts back to a previous timeline, where his proactive approach made everything surprisingly easy. The memory shifts to an upcoming sparring quest, and he wonders if the same squinty-eyed teacher will be in charge again. Peeking around the corner, he decides to get a jump on things and scope out the instructor ahead of time. But the sight that greets him makes his crimson eyes widen in disbelief. He can't make out the teacher's face, it's blurry, indistinct, like a nameless background character. He recalls how all the other extras looked just like this. But this man was different. He actually had a name. Teacher Eugene. The moment the name surfaces in his memory, the man's features snap into sharp focus. Both versions of Chris are stunned. His face, it's clear now. Something about this world has fundamentally changed. His inner self scolds him by giving that teacher a name. He's given him an actual presence in this world. But Chris just laughs it off, deciding to propose a class versus class sparring match to his new colleague. Eugene happily agrees, and a casual friendship begins to form between the two teachers. Time flies by, and life at the academy becomes a peaceful dream, filled with easy days alongside Eugene. Before he knows it, he's watching the hero Michael stand victorious at the end of the academy arc. But in an instant, that peaceful dream shatters, his idyllic calm replaced with a cold, familiar dread. He finds himself back in that dark, ethereal space, a twisted smile forming on his lips. The world snaps back to the moment the system window appeared, presenting him with the final main quest. His other self questions his hesitation. This is the moment he's been working towards, isn't it? But something feels off. He decides to wait, watching Michael's battle rage on before opening that quest. His other self wonders what he'll do when it's all over, asking if he'll pass on. Chris calmly explains that he's here for a price, and once he has it, he'll be leaving. A small, almost wistful smile plays on his lips as his inner self imagines a quiet retirement. But that's a dream for another time. His double urges him to check the final quest. As Michael's battle reaches its climax, Chris knows the end of this long chapter is here. Once the hero sets off on his real journey, a teacher is no longer needed. With a quiet sense of pride, he decides it's time to finally wrap things up. He opens the quest, ready for his reward, but the text is not what he expected. The Earth God's request is simple, direct, and utterly monstrous. Take the sword, cut open your disciple, and remove his heart. Chris stares at the system window in utter disbelief, his mind refusing to accept the words. The system addresses him by his old name, Sarah, its command chillingly simple. Suddenly, a ceremonial sword appears in his hand, and a wave of panic washes over him. His inner double manifests, grabbing him, insisting that this is his true role. He erupts in fury, screaming that he was meant to be a teacher, not a butcher. But his rage cools to a grim silence as the system begins to explain the horrifying truth. Michael's heart, it reveals, is the ultimate source of power, an artifact that fueled endless war. Meanwhile, his own homeworld, Earth, is dying and desperately needs that power to survive. And so, a deal was struck between gods, a trade to save both their dying worlds. His double smirks, calling him the Harvester, cruelly suggesting Michael would give his life for him anyway. Chris's mind reels with the cruel irony the system made him care for Michael, only to command him to kill his own disciple. He thought they were building a real connection, a friendship, but it was all just a setup, a deception from the very beginning. The system's voice is cold, absolute, there was no choice. If he refuses, everyone he cherishes in this world will die. The horrifying vision recedes, and Michael's worried voice snaps him back, asking if he's all right, but Chris is lost in the terrible math of sacrifice. The impossible weight of it all manifests as a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. But then, his grip tightens on the sword's hilt as a cold resolve forms. If Earth is destroyed, he decides, that's a failure of humanity. Michael watches, confused, as his teacher's logic continues, and if this world falls, it's the fault of its own creator God. Therefore, he declares, Michael has no responsibility to bear. His own S-rank heart should be more than enough for a temporary fix. With a raw, desperate scream, he offers himself up instead, roaring for the gods to take his heart and leave them all alone. His students can only watch in abject horror. Michael's scream for his teacher lost in the chaos. Michael can only watch, screaming his teacher's name as Dolce reels back in shock. In his final moments, Chris's resolve is absolute. As a teacher, killing his own disciple is the ultimate failure. He would much rather be the one to die, apologizing to his students for showing them such a pathetic end. And so, he meets death once again, or at least, that's how it was supposed to go. Instead, his consciousness awakens in a desolate, ruined landscape, his mind reeling. Is this what it means to be a soul? A woman's voice cuts through the haze, her gaze sharp as she identifies him as the error Cheon-Sera created. Chris is stunned to see not only her, but the original Chris and even a terrified Eugene, who stammers, asking if he's returned as a ghost. But she cuts him off, showing him a horrifying vision of the future. Michael has gone berserk, destroying everything, proving his sacrifice meant nothing. She tells him his death didn't help, but she can do one thing the system won't allow. She places a single, glowing seed in his hand, telling him to plant it in the past of a parallel world to create a new hope. The original Chris explains Eugene's new mission: find the Chris he knows and lead her here. The scene flashes to the reader, whose world is shattering as she understands the purpose of it all. She realizes in horror that Chris must have defied the system itself to force a second timeline into existence. By using such a reckless method, Chris was branded an illegal player, a system error. Suddenly everything clicks into place. Squinty's identity, her own perfect role-playing, and the constant threat of death. The reality she's been living wasn't the original story, but the second timeline created from the first's failure. Back in the desolate world, Eugene is overwhelmed, unable to grasp why Chris would sacrifice so much for him. He desperately grabs the original Chris, demanding to know where the woman he serves is right now. But he's met with a smug observation about how receiving a name has caused him to develop emotions, leaving Eugene flustered. The original Chris assures him that she's waiting in the second timeline, and he'll be sent there with his memories intact. With a heavy heart, the original Chris places his final hope in Eugene's hands. He begs him to save her, to give her the chance to find an ending she can choose for herself. Eugene feels the immense weight of this last will and testament settling upon him. Chris dreams of a simple future that was stolen, one where he and she could have just laughed together. And seeing that look, Eugene's own resolve finally hardens into a firm smile. He clenches his fist, vowing that he will do it, not for himself, but for her. As his consciousness begins to fade from this ruined world, the reader feels a jolt, hoping beyond hope that Eugene succeeded for Cheon-Sera's sake. We see a memory from Cheon-Sera herself, who explains she simply wanted to die, but her body wouldn't allow it. The system offered her eternal rest as a guide, but watching the new Chris made her foolishly start to want a happy ending too. Her voice echoes in his mind, a final farewell telling him not to worry. She knew this time he'd be alone, but with a confident smirk, he was ready to prove he was the strongest. And with that, his eyes snap open, ripped from the dream as Gusail's frantic messages flood his senses. Chris finds himself sprawled on the cold floor, the weight of reality crashing back down. His crimson eyes slowly focus, the haze of the dream fading as he questions if he's truly back. Gusail immediately starts nagging, completely panicked about the unprecedented dungeon he just experienced alone. Chris cuts straight to the point, asking how long he was unconscious, and the answer is a shocking 10 minutes. A bitter smile creeps across his face. He now understands how regressors lose their minds loop after loop. Everything becomes clear. This was his second playthrough, and the world was built on the original Chris's sacrifice. Even small details make sense now, Like why Eugene always insisted on eating together, it was their old routine. But his thoughts immediately shift to Michael, wondering if Squinty is alright after all that chaos. He knows the system wouldn't just leave a glitch like him alone, so he has to go check. With newfound purpose, he decides he'll punch Michael for worrying him, then thank him on behalf of the original Chris. Stepping outside, his eyes catch the glint of something discarded on the stone path. He stoops to pick it up, his stomach dropping as he recognizes Michael's unique dagger. A quick check of his map confirms his fears. Michael isn't there, and even the dormitory has vanished. But Chris refuses to believe he's gone for good, certain that Michael has just as many lingering regrets as he does. A fleeting memory of Eugene reminds him of debts owed and promises to keep, strengthening his resolve. Just then, a familiar blue screen flashes to life right in front of him. A main quest appears, demanding he find a legendary weapon, and its first condition is to include Michael Foxon in the party. This time, he realizes, the system is actively interfering with the world's course. A sly grin crosses his face. He has a plan to get the legendary weapons, but not by simply taking them from the kids. The very next evening, a shimmering blue portal tears open on the academy grounds. Dolce yawns, asking why their teacher called them out so late, while Leo recognizes it as a dungeon gate. Chris gravely informs them that the Demon Lord's army is on the move, and they'll need the items hidden within. But he lays down one critical rule. They are strictly forbidden from using any magic inside. Michael, now with stark white hair, casually wonders what kind of items they could be looking for. A wary Leo asks the obvious question. Surely their teacher is coming with them, right? Michael observes him, noting internally that the boy's instincts are as sharp as ever. But Chris just glares, coldly telling them to be quiet and get moving. As the students vanish into the gate, Chris remains behind, his expression grim. He steps forward, knowing the third condition to unlock this dungeon's true path. It demands a sacrifice. With no hesitation, he offers himself, Chris Doughton, as the tribute, determined to retrieve what lies in the hidden route. But instead of Chris, it's Nika Tot who is suddenly teleported, finding himself in a vast, empty temple. He spins around, completely bewildered. What is this place, and where did all his friends go? A calm voice welcomes him by name, and Nika turns to see a towering figure in brilliant white armor. The knightly guardian smirks at his confusion, musing that he supposes he could pass for Nika's big brother. He explains that this is a place of trials, and Nika's friends are all facing their own tests elsewhere. An iron shield materializes as the guardian issues his challenge. Prove your worth using only your body. The task is simple, yet daunting. Pick up the shield and block everything he's about to throw at him. At that very same moment, another scene unfolds at the Temple of the Fallen God, a place built in an era when the world had more than just one creator. Lesser gods were once worshipped, until humanity received the gift of magic and simply forgot them. And it is at this desolate altar where Chris Doughton has come to offer himself as a sacrifice. A powerful voice echoes through the ruins, finding this particular offering most satisfying. The god of power and weaponry, the war god, materializes, impressed by the vitality before him. Gusail frantically messages Chris, asking if he's insane, but he calmly tells her to wait. He has a plan. He looks the towering god in the eye, questioning why he's being treated as a sacrifice. The war god scoffs at the notion of having a follower, since no one has worshipped him for ages. But Chris fires back that his own father was a believer, killed for heresy, a backstory he proudly remembers writing himself. He spins a tale of a forgotten follower, the last man to pray to the war god even as the world persecuted him. But this god was a coward who hid, leaving his most loyal believer to be stoned to death. Chris's voice drips with contempt as he calls the deity unfit for abandoning those who believed in him. Gusail senses the fabrication, but Chris clenches his fist. This story is woven from truth and his own personal pain. A distorted memory flickers a family on an old TV, a hint that his writing is fueled by a past he refuses to dwell on. The war god, now on the defensive, asks if Chris sought him out just to hold him accountable for the past. But Chris's goal is far more practical. He came for a blessing, and he expects the god to hand over some very specific items. The god can't believe the audacity, but seeing the sly confidence in Chris's eyes, he relents, asking what sacrifice he's offering. With a brilliant flash of light, Chris declares he's already given the most precious sacrifice of all, his faith. And the mighty war god is left completely, utterly dumbfounded, his divine mind blue-screening at the sheer nerve. The war god scoffs at the idea of paying with sincerity, but Chris casually threatens to bring his entire temple crumbling down. Gritting his teeth, the god knows he's been completely outplayed by this infuriating mortal. Defeated, he finally asks what item Chris desires, and our boy's eyes glint with victory. Chris's request is simple, yet chilling. He needs a human body, specifically that of a young girl. Elsewhere, another trial is underway as a figure rushes forward to face his destiny. A younger, white-haired Michael confronts an older, more regal version of himself. The younger one seethes, declaring that he is not just some flawed copy of his future. His future self calmly agrees, stating that he is no longer the person he once was. With a flash of steel, the younger Michael lunges forward, determined to carve his own path. He drives his blade straight through the chest of his future self, a decisive and painful strike. But as the blade pierces him, the future Michael grips the weapon without a hint of pain. He smiles, explaining that everything he did was to protect those he holds dear. Meanwhile, back in the divine realm, the war god eyes Chris with suspicion. He questions if getting a new body is truly the only reason Chris came here. Chris then drops the bombshell, casually mentioning the god's failed attempt to mimic the creator's magic. He knows all about the broken, incomplete machines left behind from that failure. The god is stunned. How could this mortal possibly know about his greatest shame? Ignoring his shock, Chris simply hands over a list, telling the god to gather the items. The war god silently accepts the list, his divine authority completely subverted. After reading it, he looks up, asking a single, chilling question. Do you intend to die? Chris knows this is all part of a grand plan to stay alive, a way to avoid the story's tragic ending. The war god, with his pride shattered, finally concedes, admitting the items were useless to him anyway. He can't help but feel this mortal will cause a massive stir one day, and tells him to build his fame. Chris just smirks, looking forward to their next meeting as the system confirms his perfect victory. With the quest complete, the children have all successfully obtained their legendary weapons. The mechanical body he acquired was given to Gabbana, who can't exactly fight a demon lord as a doll. Back at the academy, Chris calculates the timeline the invasion will happen by their second year at the latest. His students need experience with their new power, and he considers finding a certain rival to speed things up. He's momentarily thrown off by how many couples are suddenly all over the campus halls. Lost in thought, he bumps right into someone, and a startled Ryan spins around, completely stunned. Ryan stammers out a greeting, asking what brings Professor Chris to the Class X hall. Chris dryly points out that this is, in fact, his classroom, and asks why Ryan looks so bothered. Denying anything is wrong, Ryan gets a casual but pointed invitation to spar with Class X. He immediately panics, making excuses about his schedule, which only confirms Chris's suspicions. Gusail chimes in, noting that Ryan's bright red face suggests it's something more personal. Finally, the boy gets to the point, nervously asking if a certain girl with short hair will be there. Chris racks his brain. Short hair? It has to be Gabbana in her new mechanical body. Then, the horrible, unbelievable truth hits him, as he recalls Ryan's other identity, Lion. There's no other explanation the kid has fallen for Gabbana at first sight. Chris just stares, wondering what is in the air today, and how this love-struck fool is supposed to fight anyone. Chris watches as Dolce, Gabbana's overprotective twin, has already cornered the flustered Ryan. He sighs, realizing this won't be easy for Lion, and decides to just find him a different sparring partner. A few days pass, and it's time for another lesson in the luxurious halls of Class X. Inside, Dolce fusses over Gabbana, worried that her new mechanical body is attracting way too much attention. As Chris enters, Dolce greets him, confident that the Lion issue has been handled, while Gabbana just thanks her sister for the concern. He brushes it aside, getting a serious look as he announces it's time to begin today's lesson. Suddenly, a new quest notification appears. The next stage of the Earth God's request involves vocational training. Leo Beck practically vibrates with excitement, eagerly asking if they're heading to the Mage Tower or the Holy Kingdom. But Chris just deadpans that they've already arrived, leaving Leo completely baffled inside their normal classroom. The training, he reveals, is the professor experience, and the students can only react with stunned disbelief. Chris decides to just listen for a bit and then nap, while Leo sulks about not going to the Mage Tower. Suddenly, the classroom door slides open, interrupting the lesson before it can even begin. A flustered Ryan rushes in, apologizing for being late as he just received the notice. He explains to Gabbana that he missed his first-year training and was assigned to their short-staffed class. The moment he officially joins, a system alert flashes, and Chris sees the quest difficulty adjusting, much to his horror. Ryan turns to greet Gabbana, completely oblivious to Dolce's murderous glare right behind her. But instead of the cold shoulder everyone expected, Gabbana blushes, wishing she'd put more effort into her looks for him. Chris is completely stunned. He was certain Ryan got rejected, so why is she acting so sweet all of a sudden? She even gently wipes his cheek, teasing him for snacking, as he bashfully plays along. Dolce, however, isn't buying it for a second, glaring at Chris, convinced this is all a conspiracy and her sister is cursed. Dolce seethes, convinced her twin has completely lost her mind over that pathetic guy. But before Chris can react to her muttering, his attention is drawn to a sound at the door. A woman peeks into the classroom, introducing herself as Letitia, the temporary teacher for another class. The name seems familiar, and Leo Beck glances over, trying to place her face. Ah, that's right. He remembers she was the substitute who briefly took over Class X. Letitia leans in close to Chris, proposing their classes collaborate on a vocational activity. Chris's eye flashes with cold suspicion. He knows a trap when he sees one. With a disarmingly calm tone, he invites her to step fully inside the room. The instant she does, he gives the order Michael and Andante are to block both exits. Letitia spins around in horror as the doors slam shut, realizing she's just walked right into a cage. With the trap set, Chris calmly remarks that her plan was incredibly sloppy. He lays out the logic. A teacher would only suggest this to either slack off, or, more likely, to exploit the understaffed academy for some nefarious purpose. The woman, Letitia, panics, but Chris declares he has all the evidence he needs. And right on cue, a demonic aura flares up as a devil's tail sprouts from her back. The memories click into place. He finally remembers her from the original timeline. Her disguise shatters, revealing a red-haired demon as he accuses her of causing the Academy's chaos. A system window confirms her identity. Sasha the Succubus, a rank 10 executive of the Demon Lord's army. Caught, Sasha just laughs, surprised she was found out so fast, and asks why Chris betrayed their side. But Chris's eyes narrow. He never thought she'd be foolish enough to target his students. Sasha sneers that the Demon Lord's target was always his class, but Chris is already sensing the chaotic energy about to erupt. He quickly pings Gusail with a private message, giving a simple, cryptic instruction for the coming chaos. The succubus mocks him, offering one final merciful favor before the real invasion begins. With a twisted smile, she unleashes her power, a storm of light that she warns him not to dodge. Her unique ability is revealed, the golden arrow, a charm that forces its victim to fall in love with the first person they see. The spell's projectiles rain down, and Ryan is one of the first to be struck, his will instantly compromised. Leo, ever the protector, tries to shield his classmates, but gets riddled with the golden arrows himself. His eyes go wide, the magic taking hold as his gaze locks onto his teacher in a moment of panic. Just as Leo screams his name, an arrow flies true, embedding itself harmlessly in Chris's chest. Sasha erupts in victorious laughter, eager to see that cold, corpse-like face finally painted with love for her. But instead of love, Chris's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated annoyance. Sasha is stunned he got hit. He didn't even try to dodge, so why isn't it working? Because the only thing Chris was looking at was Gusail's system chat window. He had to block his vision somehow, and as that realization hits her, Chris closes the distance. His hand clamps around her throat, cutting off her panicked cry. Sasha the Succubus, rank 10. He finally understands. The Demon Lord has given up trying to recruit him. She chokes out that he's right, the Demon Lord has been waiting for him for a long, long time. But as she struggles, Chris's attention is pulled away by a commotion behind her. He sees Ryan and Leo, both completely out of it, their eyes replaced with hearts. The other classes were targeted first, but Chris knows Class X has been training for exactly this. And just like that, Michael Foxon rallies his students, ordering them to subdue the succubus. Chris watches with cold indifference, still gripping the demon's throat. He sees this not as a crisis, but as the perfect opportunity for Class X to gain real combat experience. The fight is over in an instant. Sasha lies on the floor, bound and groaning in defeat. Dolce holds her captive, wondering aloud if this will finally lift the curse on her sister Gabbana. Chris agrees they'll interrogate her thoroughly before handing her over to the headmaster. But the implication is clear. The Demon Lord is impatient, and a full-scale invasion is imminent. Belle rushes over, reporting that the other charmed students have been dealt with. In the background, Chris overhears Andante coldly telling Ryan that their dating is officially over. And as if the drama wasn't high enough, Ryan actually thanks Andante for their time together, even if it was all a lie. To his absolute shock, she admits she enjoyed it too, a genuine blush on her face. Chris can only watch in disbelief as Dolce dies of secondhand embarrassment over this bizarrely beautiful breakup. But the incident has left its scars, and word spreads through the academy that some students are already dropping out. The whispers of war have become a reality, as reports of the Demon Lord's army flood in from across the continent. Chris recalls the original novel. This war was supposed to be a grand conflict between the Demon Lord and the Pontiff. A war fought for the protagonist's heart, which needed time to mature. He explains the terrifying truth to Michael. This accelerated timeline means the protagonist is growing far faster than anyone predicted. The news is official now. The Pontiff has declared war, and students are already hearing about family members volunteering. But while they expect an attack on the Holy Kingdom, Chris knows better the Demon Lord is coming for the academy. With the threat of war looming, Belle looks to her friends and asks the heavy question, what will they do now? Michael answers without a shred of hesitation. He's staying. He has nowhere else to go anyway. Inspired, Leo grits his teeth, ready to declare that Hez staying too, but Hez suddenly cut off. A voice calls out for the master professor, and Leo turns to see Chris has quietly joined them. Just then, a knight from the Crimson Kingdom appears at the window, announcing he's here on a royal escort mission. The knight throws open the doors with a flourish. It's Leo's father, here to kidnap his son, with his elegant mother right behind him. Leo is absolutely mortified. Mother? What are you doing at the school? His father grins, explaining that with the Demon Lord's army causing turmoil, the country needs to be prepared. Their forces are already clashing with the Demon Vanguard at the border, a brutal meat grinder of soldiers and skeletons. So, they came looking for someone dependable, and his gaze lands squarely on Chris. Chris deadpans, asking if he looks like some kind of personal instructor, but Leo's father just laughs it off. The man leans in, revealing he's heard all about Chris training the students and getting them new weapons. He makes an offer. He'll lend his family's soldiers, hoping Chris's training might finally make his useless son improve. An opportunity flashes in Chris's mind. If these three elite families become his backers, everything will move much faster. He agrees nonchalantly, saying he was going to train the remaining students anyway, especially since the headmaster is leaving. Then he looks Leo's mother dead in the eye, warning her that the kids are more useful than she is, so she'd better be prepared. Instead of being offended, she and the other parents eagerly volunteer their own forces, wanting in on Chris's teachings. And just like that, the remaining students began a joint training regimen with the elite soldiers of each family. Even the parents, shocked by their children's sudden growth, were inspired to join the training themselves. All the while, Chris directed the entire operation, using his meta-knowledge to shape them into a real fighting force. His grand strategy was simple. Eventually, the Demon Lord would fight Michael one-on-one. The others just needed to evacuate the civilians, so with the plan set, they headed out for another day of training. But as they walked, Chris couldn't shake a nagging feeling the main quest had been completely silent. And as if the system was listening, a notification chime suddenly breaks the quiet. The next quest finally appears. Wish of the Earth God 3-3, making Chris grimace at the creepy timing. But then his vision starts to glitch, a wave of red static washing over him as he realizes something is wrong. Quest notifications begin flooding his screen, skipping entire chapters and timelines in a chaotic cascade. Even his system AI, Goosel, is panicked by the impossible error, but Chris knows this is no mere bug. He whips around, grabbing Leo and screaming for everyone to execute the evacuation plan immediately. It all makes sense now. The reason things felt so slow is because the world's plot was just forcibly fast-forwarded. A voice cuts through the chaos, a chillingly familiar figure emerging from a swirl of purple energy. Leo's eyes widen in sheer terror. He recognizes that face from the trial. The figure smirks, a demonic horn now visible, clarifying he's not their cute little Chris. And as he fully appears, the system drops a bombshell quest: survive the Demon Lord. With a resounding clang, a heavy shield slams into the ground in defiance. Leo, shaking but resolute, screams for everyone to evacuate while he holds the line. The Demon Lord simply watches the chaos, an amused grin plastered on his face. From the crowd, Chris grits his teeth. He recognizes him, but his aura is far more powerful now. The villain's gaze cuts through the students, locking onto Chris, stating his only business is with him. A fist clenches in frustration as Chris realizes he's being called out without any of his old power. The sound of his student's voice, full of concern, cuts through Chris' stunned silence. He sees his main problem, children Michael and Leo already bracing for a fight. Michael, power flaring around him, declares that he's been preparing for this day. But all Chris can see is how young they are, how utterly outmatched they'll be. Gritting his teeth, he refuses to let them throw their lives away. He makes a new choice, quickly using a pain relief spray and a protection amulet on himself. With newfound resolve, he shouts for them to stay put and assess the situation first. Michael, ever the diligent student, immediately acknowledges his teacher's command. Chris knows the boy is strong, stronger than him even, but he can't shake the worry. He steps forward with a knowing smirk, telling them all to just wait there. And just like that, the true enemy of this trial appears before them. The future version of Michael Foxon smirks, pleased that he and Chris are finally alone. He mockingly asks if it isn't a pity Chris drove away the audience for their long-awaited duel. Still, he steps forward, claiming he'll respect Chris' choice to face him one-on-one. From the sidelines, Leo and the others can only watch, realizing their teacher must have had a reason. But the future demon lord warns that he won't be going easy on him anymore. A sickening sound tears through the air as a spike of dark energy erupts, impaling Chris through the chest. His older student looms over him, noting how that pain relief spray works wonders. Chris didn't even scream. He coldly turns his back on his teacher's skewered form. Then, with a mere thought, he unleashes his true power, summoning a forest of deadly spikes from the ground. The demon lord is baffled by his teacher's calm demeanor, wondering why he isn't even trying to kill him. But Chris, with a bloodied smirk, grabs his student's face, calling him a beautiful monster who knows nothing of the human heart. Michael recoils, finding this whole lecture incredibly embarrassing to listen to. Chris presses on, telling him the real problem is his ridiculously bloated ego. Does he really think everyone is a toy in the palm of his hand, finding it fun to watch them all run in fear? He scoffs, dismissing his student's worldview as nothing more than childish thinking. He lectures him like a toddler. You don't throw a tantrum when you want to play. You ask nicely. And that was the Demon King's fatal flaw. He was never able to become a proper adult. Because a person who only understands violence and brute force can never truly grow. And with that lesson taught, blood dripping from his lips, Chris prepares to make his declaration. With spikes at his neck, Chris declares that he's done playing this twisted game and is finally breaking free. Michael's eyes burn with a cold, possessive fury. He will not be abandoned. His inner demon howls in betrayal, a childish monster lashing out and impaling the one person he fixated on. As blood spills from his lips, Chris knows this is just enough to push Michael over the edge. His students watch in horror, but the protagonist realizes this was all part of the professor's plan. Chris's consciousness fades. He protected his heart, and now the rest is up to Michael. His body goes limp, falling back into the arms of his shocked student. The young protagonist looks on, the professor's last words echoing in his mind. He draws his blade, feeling his own power rise, ready to face the real enemy. And there he is, the true Demon King, fully manifested and seething with rage at the ultimate betrayal. He grips his sword, the terrible truth settling in. Chris took that hit on purpose just to show him the way. With newfound resolve, the protagonist lunges forward to end the monster who ruined his life. Belle tries to stop Leo, pleading that they should fight together, but Leo knows better. He tells her to let the protagonist go. This is his family's fight, and their job is to cover his back. But just as they prepare, company arrives, a mysterious woman, with bandaged eyes, flanked by demonic guards. She coolly observes the chaos, mocking both the bleeding Michael and the fallen Chris for looking like hell. With a casual flick, she prepares to intercept, standing between the students and their professor. But Leo, Angelina, and Dolce form a protective wall, refusing to let this newcomer get any closer. The woman's patience wears thin. She knows that if she waits any longer, Chris might actually die. So, she unleashes her dark power, a wicked grin on her face as she challenges the little brats to try their luck. Her attack begins, wicked black spires erupting from the ground towards the sky. Even unconscious, Chris seems to feel the vile energy, his body tensing in pain. But another figure suddenly appears, confronting the rampaging Michael Foxon. It's the novel's original protagonist, and he looks upon Michael like a long-cultivated meal. His attention, however, is stolen by the true threat, a massive shadow dragon roaring its intent. Utterly unfazed, the hero offers the beast a single piece of advice: surrender. The dragon scoffs, grabbing him and lecturing that in war, only winning and losing matters. A flicker of annoyance crosses the protagonist's face. This creature is about to regret its choice. A holy sword ignites in his hand as he declares he'll finish this quickly. With a blinding flash and a deafening boom, the counterattack begins. A single, brilliant slash of light carves through the battlefield. The massive shadow dragon is obliterated in an instant, its form dissolving into nothing. Elsewhere, the students fight with surprising coordination, as Andante leaps in to cover a comrade. Dolce calls out their next target, confirming that Belle has already healed their injured. Her sister Gabbana responds without a word, her mechanical hands drawing back a golden arrow. The twins unleash a perfectly synchronized shot, a deadly beam of energy screaming towards its mark. Leo and Nika stand as a bulwark, their enchanted shield holding strong against the demonic tide. But their impressive display is being watched by a far more dangerous foe. A sinister smile spreads across her face as she decides it's time to step in personally. Suddenly, a terrifying new presence makes both Leo and Andante freeze in absolute shock. She's bored of watching. With a flick of her wrist, she decides to end this child's play. The woman reveals her true power, an arm forged from countless souls, a thrill she's eager to share. In a flash, she lunges towards Leo, her speed utterly overwhelming him. But Andante shoves him clear, trying to take the hit, as Nika desperately raises her shield. A strange, dark energy washes over the shield's surface, not breaking it, but changing it. Leo screams her name, but it's too late. Nika is frozen solid, turned to stone. He watches in horror as the curse instantly spreads, petrifying Dolce and Gabbana where they stand. Enraged, Andante glares back, his eyes burning with defiance. He will not fall so easily. He grips his own weapon, readying a desperate counterattack against this monster. But it's useless. The curse claims him too, freezing him mid-swing, a statue of defiance. Only Belle remains, vowing to somehow free her friends from their stone prisons. But the blindfolded woman appears behind her, mocking their beautiful friendship. She tries to tempt Belle, daughter of the werewolf chief, suggesting she should be on their side. Join her, she offers with a smirk, and she'll spare the petrified students. But when she looks up, Belle is gone, vanished into thin air. The woman scoffs, wondering if the little wolf girl wants to play hide and seek. Suddenly, a strange clattering sound echoes from the distance, catching her attention. It's the sound of skeletal hooves galloping at an impossible speed. A new challenger arrives, screaming for everyone to get out of his way, for the true Lord of Destruction is here. The blindfolded woman is just stunned, utterly baffled by this chaotic entrance.